Okay, hello and welcome everybody to the June 27th, 2012 meeting of the Amherst Planning Board. Please come on in and find a seat. All open seats are available for sitting.
People can sit on the windowsill too if they're agile.
Okay. The first, we have a lot to get through tonight. So we'll go right into approving the minutes of May 23rd and June 6th. Any comments from the board on those minutes? Mr. O'Keefe.
I move approval of the minutes of May 23rd, 2012 and May 2nd, 2012. I'm sorry, May 23rd and June 6th, 2012.
Second.
Any further discussion, comments from the board? All in favor of approving the minutes? And abstentions?
I have to abstain. I was not present at the May 23rd meeting.
Oh, should have done two motions. That's okay. We'll move on.
I'm sorry, Kathy. Mr. Crow, would you mind? Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Crow, grab it.
Please leave your seat.
3 seats here, Mr. Crow.
Okay, musical chairs.
May I pass these to the chair?
Okay. The next item on our agenda for tonight is a public hearing, being 7:05, site plan review 2012-7, M13281, 79 South Pleasant Street, brought by the trustees of Amherst College. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised, and notice has been posted in the town hall and sent to abutters. The hearing is being held to provide the opportunity for interested citizens to be informed about and to comment on this proposed site plan. Amherst College is requesting site plan review approval for renovation of the building and construction of an addition at 79 South Pleasant Street, including parking lot and site improvements under section 3.330.0 of the zoning bylaw. Do we have any board member disclosures with respect to the site plan review? If not, we will proceed directly to the Ms. Brestra.
May I just make a comment that this meeting or public hearing is being opened slightly later than state law normally allows. It's past the 65 days from the time when the application was initially filed with the town clerk. The reason is that there was an error in a legal ad. We didn't publish it in time, and so we had to make arrangements to hold a public hearing a week later, and Amherst College has given us agreement in writing to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Brestrup. I should also add that this meeting is being televised on Amherst Media, and is also the audio is being taped by staff for the use of preparation of minutes. Okay, so I'd just like to state that all questions, comments, remarks are to be directed to me after being recognized, and everyone needs to identify themselves, including your name and street address. The applicant can proceed with the presentation, please.
Sure. How would you like us to set up? Oh, down here, or would that be?
Well, the board needs to be able to see what you're doing. Unfortunately, that may not be compatible with the public at home seeing it.
Okay.
Well, should we set the easel up here then?
What about there, right?
Facing you guys?
Do you need this easel?
DPW to figure all that out. They've asked for a couple little things like, you know, some conduit through the site so that when they redo the street lights running down here, it's easier for them to get through there and whatnot, so that will be all accommodated. So essentially, but the overview is that the driveway into the back parking will remain on the south side with no parking along it, just a drive, one-way drive. And then parking across the back just as it is now. and a couple of spots along the face of the building, and a one lane out, just like it is now essentially here. There are some bumps that exist now that will be removed. There's a kind of a loggia that runs across here that will be removed. There's a bunch of things that were added over time that will be removed to restore it back to more of that kind of historic simplicity. The big piece here out front is really to create a nice, almost mini park kind of a feel that Jeff's created for us, that of course incorporates handicap accessibility to the front door, which is up, I don't know, 36,
2.5, 3 feet, yeah.
3 feet or so, as well as accessibility up to the back here. This is also an accessible path. With a low seating wall. This is kind of a raised planter along here with a flowering tree or specimen tree here. Some planting through here. Curved, very durable benches out there for really public use, associated with the PBTA stop and Peter Van stop. There's a lot of folks that are in that space. So we're kind of creating a bit of a public gesture there, but centered on the front of the building. There's a bike rack on the side, some plantings around that, plantings running along the face here, and again this college access to the main entry point for our folks and people that are going to those offices up the side there. So with that, I'll turn to the applicant report and run through all of these pieces. I won't speak to everything. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions, or someone from this team can. Parking, of course, is always an issue, but this is downtown, and so I think it says here somewhere, it says it better than I could say it, but how that's not, oh yeah, okay, issue is one, parking. So I won't speak to that. Well, I guess I should say that the intention is never to provide parking at the location of anything on the campus. It's just like any campus. Parking is a pool, and first come, first serve and whatnot. So there is some parking here associated with folks working in the building, but right across the way there's our big parking lot, and folks will, just like anywhere else, just like in my office, if you get there early, you can park close, and if you drive in at 10 o'clock because you had a meeting earlier, you walk across campus from some remote parking area. So that's not an issue from our perspective. Lighting, we do have, of course, lighting incorporated into the design, and I don't know which way to go. Maybe this one's easier just to see the majority of it. And most of it is actually on the building. There are small downlights mounted. You can just pick up off of the rendering here to light the pedestrian way around the building. There is an existing pole-mounted sight light out in here at this corner that will remain. And then the only sight light that we are adding is one of our campus standard lights right here to kind of continue the fabric of the campus vernacular to the building, and also to create lighting here at the entryway, of course, and importantly at the crossing where pedestrians cross the drive. There are these other small downlights kind of wrapping around the back of the building, and we can talk more to that too. Right, so where was I? Lighting. Erosion control, essentially there is none. It's a paved site. During construction there will be erosion control just as part of the contractor's means and methods, but can talk more to that. Traffic impact, the amount of traffic will be reduced. We are asking for a waiver for a traffic impact study or statement. Signs, so there are really only a couple of things associated with signage. There's, at the entry point here, there'll be a sign that is typical to entries to any Amherst College property that's with vehicular access, saying that it's Amherst College property and, you know, only park here if you have a sticker and that type of thing. There'll also be something over in here, right, Jeff? You have something that says, you know, do not enter. Right?
Oh, right,
Yeah,
the traffic sign.
Just so that we keep things clear. And of course, you know, handicap only parking space here, sign. And then as far as building signage, which I know is what you're really asking about there, at the main entry on the front of the building, there'll just be vinyl lettering on the glass stating that it is the 5 college languages program. There is a small historical plaque on the building at about this location that will be reinstalled after renovation is completed. And then at this back college entrance, there'll be a small sign / directory with the names of the departments that are included there, just located just to the side here as you're walking in. And that's the extent of signage. We don't have the graphics of any of that kind of thing. It just hasn't been developed yet. The management plan has been submitted. Handicap accessibility is all per code. Fire department, we've met a couple of times to review. We actually met early with them because we were concerned about access to this back lot. During construction, of course, the entire site will be fenced off. And we've met with Chief McKay twice and reviewed all that, and he's comfortable with that, as well as, of course, the design and what's being done. Met with DPW and Jason, town engineer. I mentioned a couple of things along those lines earlier.
Can we take a short break, Mr. President?
Sure.
I just want to interrupt to point out that the town engineer did submit written comments, and I think we emailed them to you earlier, and you should have them in your pile, your packet that I handed out this evening.
Thank you.
Okay. The architectural and historical significance, I talked a bit about. Of course, it was reviewed by historical, and they were quite happy, as well as design review board. The next item on here, quite happy. Oh, here we go. Landscape plan. I was mentioning earlier, and you had noted in the report that you may wish to inquire about the large trees on the adjacent property. And the intention is to maintain, particularly these two are particularly, this one actually is particularly wonderful. But there are a number of nice trees along here, and the intention is to maintain those. We are going to take a look to see if we have any Norways or other invasives out there.
Yeah, that we'll take out.
That really should be removed. But there are some wonderful trees there that will remain. I mentioned the bike racks. There'll actually be two. There's our quote unquote the college use bike rack. Of course, anybody can use it. That's associated more with the building, and then there'll be a PBTA standard bike rack next to the bus shelter. I'm happy to talk more about any of that, and any of these folks are happy to talk more about the specifics of it, as you would like to ask.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
I'll give the quick report on the site visit that took place this morning, attended by 3 members of the planning board. Let's see, the site visit began at 9:05 a.m. At the visit they noted that the location and surroundings of the proposed project is directly across from the Amherst Common. The south and west of the property is Hitchcock Dormitory belonging to Amherst College parking area. The north side is a commercial building that's owned by Brody Block LLC. And let's see, the site is flat except for a slight slope leading up to the front door from the sidewalk. There's the bus stop there. The driveways on either side of the building are used to gain access to the rear side of the building, which houses Laughing Dog Bicycles and Hastings Stationers, among other businesses. The northern driveway will be blocked during construction, but it'll be open again once construction is complete. Currently, there's angled parking on the south side of the building, which is proposed to be eliminated, as they stated, reducing the number of parking spaces for the site from 24 to 14. Stone wall will remain on the southwest corner of the property and will screen the dumpster from public view. There's little landscaping, except as has already been discussed. The history of the building is that it was a brick structure built in the 1830s. It was once the home of the First Baptist Church. Over the years, additions have been constructed. The earliest addition was in 1905. That's the brick structure on the west side of the building. There are also later additions, such as the current concrete block and brick structure at the rear of the church that was constructed in the 1960s. That's proposed to be torn down. There are also later additions, including a covered stairway on the north side and a covered porch on the south side that runs the length of the building. All of those are to be removed and the building restored to its original building only. Let's see. They're proposing to restore the windows to their original size. All right. The questions that arose at the site visit, I believe some of this has been addressed already. Will the driveway be blocked, or will public still be able to pass through the site on the driveway? I think that after construction, the public will still be able to pass through. Will the yews on the south side of the property be removed? And yes, the overgrown yews will be removed. How does the college plan to address the issue of skateboarders?
By putting in benches that can handle it. Essentially, it's just a reality that the design has to be robust and be able to live with the reality of occasional use in that way. And Jeff's done a good job of figuring out ways to do that with stone caps on the walls and metal benches running across the curves.
Okay, thank you. We had a question about the sign plan. How will the signs be handled? And you're asking for a waiver of the sign plan. So, what was your decision for not submitting a sign plan and just telling us what it was?
The signing is de minimis. I guess is the answer there. We're happy to submit something later on when it becomes known and the graphics are. At some point, the graphics will be completed, and we can submit for your review at that point. But there's just not a lot of signage.
Okay. And the last question was with respect to lighting on the site, and you described that there are going to be downlights more or less surrounding the building, and a one single campus standard pole light to be installed to the center and south of the building across the driveway. I didn't see, and correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see cut sheets for those lights in your packet.
If you have some.
We have those now.
You want to find these here, just share a little bit. Sure.
Thank you very much. We'll pass those around.
Here, just napkins.
Okay, while that's going on, any questions for the applicant from the planning board? Members of the planning board or staff?
In terms of signage, will the building itself have a name, or will it be identified only by the programs that are inside it?
That's a great question. At this point, it only has the name 79 South Pleasant, the address. But of course, the college does name buildings for people. There's no plan for that. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, and it's usually not before a project is completed, but that could be the case, that it becomes the Roberts building.
Yeah.
Just to pick somebody out of the crowd.
Thank you.
As I'm in looking at these cut sheets for the lights, I'm not quite clear on whether all the light is below 90 degrees or not. In other words, are these sconces? I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, the sconces. The first fixture you see there are the sconces that are they're attached to the building, kind of working around the building in the rhythm of the windows, and those are all completely downcast lights. They don't project past 90 degrees. There's no uplight component to those, and that you can sort of see the housing, which is a cutoff shield for that light. So that light is designed specifically just to wash down the face of the building.
So it only goes down, and then the post light is also, I see, it says dark sky, night sky roof optics.
Right.
Included.
We have where's that? I know you can all read these little numbers. If you look closely, it came up here, you'd be encouraged to see that there's zeros all the way around the site here. So there's absolutely no light spilling off the site past the property line at all. These foot candles are around 3 to 4, which is this existing level here are these two, provided by these two lights. And that just kind of creates a 3 to 4 foot candle level along this walkway, which then is sort of boosted by this new light that's coming in here, then picked up by the downlighting on the building. So this is all in the 3 to 4 foot candle range, and then again 0 at the edges.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Crown.
I think there was spotlights in the southwest corner, and maybe in the south northwest corner of the lot.
There's some existing
Yeah.
pole lights back
On the
there.
pole, right, on
Yeah.
the utility pole, right. And those aren't, my understanding is that those aren't college fixtures, those are National Grid's fixtures or whoever's. If they want to change them, we can ask them to change them. But it's they're their lights, it's their pole. So
That's the one at the back of the
in the
site?
back corner by the retaining wall, right?
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can answer this, but why would they have a spotlight back there in their property?
I don't know. I mean, it's depending on how these utilities are set up. They're going to drop poles wherever they have easements for, or wherever they have the rights to. What they do with those poles once they're there, there's poles in crazy places that they own. Being in an older town, it doesn't surprise me that there's some pole service connections that extend through lots and behind lots. So it occurs in downtown Northampton as well.
If those are not dark sky compliant, I would like to suggest that at least they be asked
Mm-hmm.
the next time they're replaced.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Don't disagree.
And then as far as the pole lights out front, you said that the DPW was talking about replacing those at some point. You were asked to run conduit.
Yes, that's our understanding. There's a large, kind of cobra head type right here, and I don't, and there must be down here, I can't recall. But immediately on the property or in front of the property, there is not. And so what they've asked for is an easy path from one corner of the property across to the other, so when they do pull new lines, it's just easier for them.
I see. So there's no lights that you know of proposed for the site by the town?
No.
All right. All right, any comments or questions from the board?
I just have a question about, and this is really more of a town question. With the bus stop there, Chris, is there any chance of a town street light being installed?
I think that is the intention. I heard Jason Skills, the town engineer, discussing that there will be a light somewhere in that location. He wasn't sure exactly where that light was going to be.
Yeah. Are they talking about, and this is slightly off topic, but it is, if they're thinking about putting lights in there, currently a lot of the lights downtown are these glass globe-topped posts that cast tremendous glare and are really just terrible lighting fixtures for safety and for visibility and for the night sky. I'm wondering, if anything's going to go in on this site, if there's a way that we can ask whoever's putting it in to not use that type of fixture anymore.
I know they are changing all the bulbs to LED. I think they got a grant to do that, but I don't know what they're doing as far as shielding the tops of some of those fixtures, but I could ask that question.
Okay. Thank you. Be interested to know. Mr. Carson.
I know Jonathan Tucker said, I'm sure at one of our meetings, that those lamps are equipped to have something on the top that would keep the light from shining up, but they hadn't installed them.
Oh.
That there had been a budget problem. But I think they could be in the future.
Oh. Thank you.
Am I remembering that correctly? Do you remember?
I believe so.
I think
yes,
so.
I believe that's right.
Thank you. Okay, moving along. Any more questions from the board? Hearing none, any comments or questions from the members of the public? Yes, Mr. Hartman.
Tom Hartman. My office is above Hastings there. First, I like the building quite a bit. What I've observed is that northern driveway is really a critical access point out of the back lots. The trucks for Hastings come in their driveway, but almost everybody goes out that driveway. And if it's blocked off, there should be some notification on the street for pedestrians or something, because they're totally unaware. When I drive out of Hastings driveway, they're right next to Veracruzano, I crawl out and I practically have people walk into my car. It's not nearly as bad if I come out that northern drive, because I can see to the right, and it's a little further away. So I think if you're going to block the entire site, something should be done to, and I think it'll be quite a disruption for Hastings as well. So if there's any way that there could be a drive aisle, I think it would be helpful.
What's the please, go ahead.
We agree that there's a real issue there. And the quick answer is no. We cannot maintain a drive aisle here. This is very tight. This is all new construction with full basement. There's just no way. Even the staging and just getting a wall through there takes all of that space. So we have been in communication with the property manager for this property to the north on a number of occasions to try, I guess, to talk about how that's going to be managed. And that was really our primary impetus also for meeting early with the fire department, concerned about that. Beyond that, I agree that there's some mechanism there. It makes sense to be able to control that alley.
Two of those parking spaces in front of Hastings and make them available for deliveries or something like that, because that's going to be an issue. Even turning a truck around back there, you pull in, go to the loading dock, they're right back out. So there's a flow through, and if it's one way in and one way out, it's going to be a problem for them, especially in winter.
Would you ask Mr. Hartman to repeat his statement and tell which spaces he's talking about?
Could you point on the map, Mr. Hartman, to where you're...
It's not on here.
I'm talking about spaces directly in front of the AJ Hastings, in front of the store, so that they could use that to make their deliveries and then walk them up or something like that. There are frequently 2 or 3 trucks in the back there. And in the wintertime, that's only exacerbated with snow storage and so forth and so on. So it'll all work out in the end, I'm sure.
I have a question just real quick about the schedule for construction. What's your planned start and completion date for the portion of it that would involve closing down that drive aisle?
Yes. The construction is intended to start in about 3 weeks and will go for about a year. And the entire site will be fenced for the duration, essentially.
Thank you. Mr. Brestrup, did you have any comment about how this might work as far as parking spaces? I thought I saw you had your hand up.
I only had a comment about what they were proposing for parking, so if you're ready to hear about that, I can help.
My understanding is that the select board is in charge of the downtown parking district, correct me if I'm wrong. And any concerns about blocking off spaces for particular use or changing meters or anything like that would require approval by the select board. Now, we could certainly make a suggestion or recommendation to the select board about something like that. Query whether that's appropriate given it's not actually part of the site. Yes, Ms. Brestrup.
The entities involved may wish to go to the select board together. They may wish to write a letter together saying that they agree that this could be done or should be done, whoever is interested in having this done. That's sort of the normal course of events that people who want, for instance, when Boltwood Place was built, the owners of Boltwood Place approached the select board to have those particular parking spaces blocked off, and I think it turned out that it was under the town manager's jurisdiction over there. But it was the private entity that approached the select board, and I don't believe that the planning board kind of got in the middle of that. I mean, you're certainly welcome to make the recommendation, but I just wanted to say that that's sort of how it normally occurs.
Well, it's certainly outside the scope of the site plan review about the site itself, so that sounds like a reasonable approach to me. So, Mr. Hartman, if you want to talk to your landlord about working something out for Hastings, I'm sure they'd appreciate it. Other comments, questions from the public? All right. Hearing none. And yes, Ms. Brestrup.
May I make a comment about the parking?
Sure.
We had discussions about this internally in the planning department. There's no clear section in the zoning bylaw that specifically talks about this type of use in the downtown district. There is a municipal parking district that allows an exemption from on-site parking to certain types of uses, but this particular use is not among those uses. However, we did determine that there is a section that's sort of a, what should I say, fail-safe, or something that kind of allows a broad range of discretion on the part of the planning board, and that is the section 7.005. It's for all other permitted uses, and you would determine that the amount of parking that they're proposing, is adequate given the fact that they're near a bus stop, the fact that they have parking, a campus-wide parking plan, the fact that there's municipal parking nearby, a number of different issues like that. You would determine that they meet the conditions of section 7.005 if you were to decide that. I just wanted to make that a little clearer because it wasn't totally clear that they were not covered by the municipal parking district exemption.
Okay, so as I understand it, the proposed number of spaces, I guess, can you clarify whether the proposed number of spaces is subject to any rule about how many there need to be, a maximum or a minimum, that we're going to be waiving, or?
No, there is no rule. If you agree that they fall under the category of section 7.005. I did speak with the planning director, Jonathan Tucker, about this, and he felt comfortable that that was the section that they would fall under, and as you have referred to in the past, it talks about adequate parking spaces to accommodate under normal conditions the cars of occupants, employees, members, customers, clients, and visitors to the premises. I understand that the front part of this building is going to be primarily graduate students who, we were told this morning at the site visit, will be using public transportation. You know, perhaps some of the people who are working in the other portion of the building are using Amherst College parking elsewhere on campus. So all of those things would come into play in making a determination about whether the parking is adequate. But I just wanted to kind of point out that they're not. There's not a clear way of figuring this out. It is becoming part of the campus, so you could look at it as, you know, part of the overall campus parking scheme.
Yeah, so 7, we're not in the educational district. So 2 doesn't apply. I'm looking at section 7, which addresses the parking requirements, and religious and educational uses are addressed under 7.003, places of public assembly, meeting halls, and dwelling places of religious communities. Really, none of those really apply to what we're talking about here. And then for retail, office, and similar uses, which I think is more similar to what this is, in the BG district, the rule is that there be 3.3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross first floor area, plus 2.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, exclusive of storage space on all other floors. So that's very clear. Ms. Kruger?
I was going to say, I think this might fit into the educational exemption section of 48, because these are educational uses, they're ancillary functions to the college, so we may not need to slice and dice the other sections of the bylaws. We decide as an educational use under section and review. We might want to talk about the placement of things and the flow, but I think to use a standard from our bylaw for an educational use might not fit.
So let me ask this, does anyone on the board have any objection to the proposed parking for this project? Yes, Mr. O'Keefe.
So I just wanted to say for the record that I think that given access to the campus-wide parking system that Amherst College has, I have no concerns at all about the parking on site here.
I more or less concur.
I think if there is any concern, why don't we offer a parking exemption? Why not? Rather than just state that we think it fits under the educational bylaw or whatever, just offer a waiver of parking. We've done that in the past.
A waiver of any applicable parking requirements, and find that under section 7.005 it's adequate to accommodate normal conditions. All right, yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay. Ms. Kruger?
I wanted to make a more global comment, so thinking about this. I think with the college taking on this building, they have the resources and the vision to kind of put this back in a way that maybe a private owner wouldn't have been able to do, and I'm really appreciative of the care of the building, but I also see it as an annexation of an important part of downtown, moving it over to part of the campus. And I think in the town's master planning for downtown, maybe the college's master planning, it would have been nice to have more of a conversation of where the town really saw its important boundary, because this is weaving into the fabric of the campus, and we're losing a little piece of the downtown, and it's not really a blame thing, but I want it to be noted, and I know when this purchase happened, I was on the Board of Assessors, and it was certainly noted that this moved from a taxable building to a non-taxable building. And all of these things have implications for the town, and I think have broad planning implications. And I don't think it has to hold up our review of this, which is much more specific to the building and the site plan. But I do wonder what kind of conversations might happen between the town and the college, so that we have a sense of where that really firm, we care about keeping this as a downtown edge, and where the college sees itself well, I mean, we're in a market economy, the building was up for sale, they bought it, I get that, but I have a little bit of feeling about losing this as part of the downtown.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Mr. Crowner.
I share that, but I think it's a transition place. The bus stop is still going to be there. There's going to be a public seating area there, so it's not completely lost from the downtown. It's part of the downtown and it's part of the campus. I see, but I do share your concern overall.
I'll just add that I think that it's the renovations and the addition really, I think, are going to be a big net gain to that particular area. The existing building is not what it could be, and I think, and the design review board weighed in on this as well, that they thought it was a very, very appropriate design for the site. So I understand Ms. Kruger's concern, and I share the concern about the loss of taxable real estate, but I also welcome Amherst College making renovations to this important building. Okay.
Just wanted to say it on the record.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public or for the board as far as that need to take place during the public hearing portion of this site plan review? If not, can I have a motion, please?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion? Closing the public hearing. Hearing none. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. The public meeting is closed. Public hearing is closed, rather. We've been through the development application report with the applicant. They're asking for 3 waivers. That's the sign plan, the soil erosion plan, and traffic impact statement. Did anyone have any specific concerns with respect to things that were brought up in the development application report that might lead to any conditions? All right. I suggest that we address any further concerns in the context of the site plan review criteria. Ms. Brestrup?
Did the board suggest that the waivers would include the waiver of any parking requirements that are in the bylaw, or did you?
Yeah, I think that the language that I said was that we would, and I think Mr. Crowner said we'd waive the parking requirements, but I think that means that we're actually finding that the proposed, the parking proposed for this project is adequate for normal use under section 7.005 of the bylaw, or could be an educational exemption. I don't know if we need to put both those in there, or could
I just wanted to clarify
any alternative.
I actually did suggest a waiver of park requirements.
Waiver of parking requirements. Can we do that?
under section 7.9.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
7.9. All right. Yeah, 7.9 of the zoning bylaw, which allows us to waive any section or subsection of Article 7 for compelling reasons of safety, aesthetics, or site design. Okay. All right. The site plan review criteria are set out in section 11.24 of the zoning bylaw. We use these in evaluating the site plan. 11.240 general, conformance with all appropriate provisions of the zoning bylaw. With the exception of the parking, it conforms. 11.2401, protection of town amenities and abutting properties through minimizing detrimental or offensive actions. The applicant has represented that they are that there's no way to keep that northern driveway open. That there's no, so that's, I guess, as minimized as it can get as far as the impact on the surrounding area. I presume the if I can ask a question of the applicant, that the bus stop will remain operational and there will be sufficient room for people on the sidewalk.
Yeah, we've been in conversation with PVTA, and they're planning on moving it temporarily down the street just a bit. Actually, it's down the street right now because of the DPW work going on here.
Okay.
That's their plan.
And please, anyone on the board who has comments on any of this as I go through them, just speak up, because I might not see your hand. 11.2403, protection of adequate recreational facilities, open space, and amenities. That would be the bus stop, and it is adequate. 11.24, environmental. 2410, protection of unique, important natural, historic, or scenic features. The building is being restored to some extent to its historic condition. There is nothing natural on the site. Refuse disposal, the dumpsters are going to be shielded. That was 2411. 2412, sewage and water supply. We had a report from Jeff Skeels addressing those, and he was satisfied that he set some conditions and was satisfied that they could be met. Drainage system within and adjacent to the site. I think that was also addressed in Mr. Skeels' report, found to be adequate. Landscaping, 2414 is screening, street trees. There's the landscape plan seems reasonably complete for the area that's proposed to be landscaped, which is not much, but it's certainly adequate. 2415, we're proposing to waive the soil erosion plan. 2416, protection of adjacent properties, minimizing the intrusion of air and water. Fine. 2417, lighting is fine. 2418, flood hazards is inapplicable. 2419, wetlands is inapplicable. 2420 is inapplicable. Oh, let's see. Provisions of design review remain in effect. Ms. Brestro.
I believe this is not in the National Historic Register District,
But
but the Design Review Board does review it because it's in their area of jurisdiction. So they have reviewed it based on their principles and standards and have recommended to you approval.
it is in the BG district, though.
It is in the BG.
Which says within the BG district and for any town project with any district. I'm
Yeah.
satisfied that the design review requirements are met by the design review board.
Yes.
Ms.
Yeah.
Ford, did you attend the meeting when they
I
discussed
did.
this? And did they
I
have?
wholeheartedly approve. Yes.
Okay, they approved as well. Thank you. 2421, setbacks, parking, landscaping, entrances and exits. With respect to surrounding buildings, there's going to be some difficulty during construction, but when the project is complete, the access to the building will actually be improved, at least on the south side. And the lighting will be improved as well. 2422 is inapplicable. 2423 is inapplicable. 2424, screening is adequate. 11.243, traffic and parking. Convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. It's a difficult site as far as ingress and egress, but it's worked for a long time and it'll probably continue to work essentially similar in the future. Curb cuts is inapplicable, no change there. Parking spaces, bike racks, etc., safe and convenient. That's fine. 2 bike racks, no less. Access to adjoining properties is being improved. That's 2433. 2434 is inapplicable. 2435, joint access driveways between adjoining properties, that's not changing. 2436, traffic impact report is proposed to be waived. That's the end of the site plan review criteria. Okay. All right, so we have findings with respect to each part of the design review criteria, site plan review criteria rather. We have proposed waivers as discussed, including a waiver of the parking as requested, plus a waiver of the parking requirement, 4 altogether. And I have not heard any conditions proposed, except for our landscaping being continually maintained, lighting being downcast and not shining onto adjoining properties, 4 sets of plans being submitted to the planning department, and there's one more.
The permit expires in 2 years if not.
Somebody mentioned asking the applicant to have National Grid change out that pole head, and I don't know if you want that as a condition or not.
Right?
Yes.
I don't know about how to make that a condition, so
It is on their property, I don't either, but
We can respectfully ask that they try. It would improve your property to have them do it,
Happy to do so.
but I don't think we should add it as a condition. Do I have a motion? Mr. O'Keefe.
I move that the board approve site plan review application 2012-0007, 79 South Pleasant Street, subject to the conditions so ably enumerated by our chair, and with the grant of the waivers requested for the sign plan, soil erosion plan, traffic impact statement, and a waiver of the parking requirements under section 7.9 of the zoning bylaw.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? Great, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation, and we look forward to seeing the finished product.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck.
Very much. On M524, 1150 West Street, Atkins Farm Market. This is a review of revised plans in accordance with conditions 4 and 5 of the site plan review decision we did.
They did send
In July 8th, and this was in our packet. We had asked the applicant to come back, among other things, with the design and layout of the northern area of the site, including the coffee and donut drive-through, the ATM drive-through, and the entrances and exits onto West Bay Road shall be re-examined with regard to safety for pedestrians, vehicles, and bicycles. Based on this re-examination, a revised plan for the area should be submitted to the planning board for its review and approval prior to construction. And condition 5, bike racks shall be installed, and a revised site plan showing the bike racks should be brought back in. Okay, tell us what you got.
Sure.
Identify yourself.
I'm Jeff Squire from the Berkshire Design Group here at Atkins Market. So yeah, this just real quickly was an overview of the plan that was approved, with conditions at the previous hearing. So the focus was really what goes on up here and how this functions. And the first phase of this overall project has been completed. So now they're ramping up for the second phase, which includes the addition in the front. Hopefully improvements to the drive-through area and ATM and the way circulation of this parking lot works. So right now, just to familiarize everybody, this is the new alignment for 116 right now on West Bay Road. There's currently this curb cut opening was an existing curb cut opening that is going to remain. And there's provisions when they redo this work that's going to be returned. Right now there's some grade issues that they've got to work out when that, but that's sort of the meshing of the two projects. This one has already been improved, and then these obviously are going to be improved in addition to what they already are, so that when this new parking lot is up online, that it all functions correctly. So we had shown a proposed ATM location, in the front corner of the site. Access generally would be out through this outer loop. What we've done to try and improve access and concerns out here to the extent that we can is made this just a one-way exit out, so it would be a right turn only out of there. This deals with traffic, coming out of the drive-through, out of the ATM, and again, cars can exit out that way from the parking lot. Though I think that once the project is complete and all the improvements for the road are going to be done, you know, the driving in and out of the lot, the site is going to, you know, the habits are going to change a little bit, and this won't be the primary, you know, way in. We additionally had concern about, you know, cars coming in through here and cutting through, and so what we've done is provide a little bump out so that this, you know, hopefully reads as a much more of a service area. We need to provide some break in the pavement there, in the curb there, so that trucks can come in and back up if they don't have a break there. They can't pull up far enough to get the trailer to swing around and back up in. So we've got to leave a break there, but we've made that, you know, a one-way entrance in. There'll be a do not enter sign. You know, from this direction, you can't come in, you know, from here any other way. This would be, you know, an exit out. I think the remainder of the site really, you know, is unchanged. The only other minor modification that got made, there was previously a covered awning, you know, wood shed roof over the drive-through. I think that has been shortened back to just over the, you know, the counter window itself, rather than a full, you know, full overhang. Originally, there were posts out on this island. So generally, this is how we picture circulation. You know, cars can come back in and enter back into the site, but generally, that's an exit only. And then in regards to what the ATM is right now, they're in discussions with East Hampton Savings Bank. This is their ATM. You know, I don't have anything to do with it. This is their prototype ATM, and they have, you know, there's several of these I know around in the valley that I've seen. I can't think of a specific location, but so that's this location down here, which is, you know, is actually a low point of the site. So in some ways, you know, I see a lot of people cringing, and I understand your concerns, but in some regards, I don't think the impact will be as detrimental as some might think, because this sidewalk, this parking lot, there are two elevations. They're probably 3 to 5 feet difference in elevation. If you look at the grading plans, I brought, you know, what was submitted before, but there is a grade difference here because this roundabout got dropped so much in grade. So there's a bit of a berm here along this edge, and then this portion of the site itself is sort of the low point, the current low point of the site. So, you know, you've got a combination of the berm and then, you know, where this ATM sits down, you know, from a site distance, you know, coming into the roundabout, at least the berm and, you know, some of the grade differences, you know, help to alleviate some of that. So, I think that's.
I have a question for Ms. Brestrup. Does the signage on this ATM fall within our purview to regulate?
I believe it does. In the past, the planning board has had some success in having corporate entities change their signs for Amherst. So if you feel strongly about something, I think that you should make that statement, and we would pass it along to East Hampton Savings Bank through their representative.
I see. Okay.
There's a sign, there's an ATM in that, that's a sign much like that.
Right. Just curious as to whether there's, as to the scope of, or because it just, you know, we do regulate signs here, so it's clearly a sign. Yes, Ms.
You
Kruger.
can't see behind you.
Yeah, I'm going to turn around and face the board now.
I just want to make sure I think I wasn't at the meeting when this was reviewed prior, so if I'm reading this correctly, is that the actual building is proposed and then you've inserted what the ATM would look like in the photograph, or is this just
No, this is just a picture of the ATM.
It's because the reason I was cringing is the way you have a little roof protected and then another little roof to the ATM, and I thought, so that's why I was making it. Okay, so that's really not the way. This is standalone.
This is a standalone unit, just like
so
this. It's just this piece here,
looking
right?
at how the architecture and that ATM.
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Kruger. Sorry, Ms. Brestrup.
I just wanted to respond to Ms. Kruger. I asked Atkins to provide this photograph of the ATM because the picture of it is a little bit more extreme than the actual fact of it, and I thought it might help to see a photograph of one of these things in place.
But not this proposed place.
All right. So, aside from the ATM, the real bike racks are going
Yes.
where?
They're currently shown right in front of the sort of the what's going to become the dining area, I guess, whatever it is. Out in front along the sidewalk here, there's it's a large paved plaza area out in front. So they're shown now out in front of there.
And what is it exactly? Is it 2 loops or is it 2 racks? Like, that wasn't.
It's 2 racks. Yeah.
Mr. O'Keefe?
The exit onto West Bay Road, the eastern exit, did you say that was going to be right turn only?
It would be a right turn only.
And what's going on in the middle of West Bay Road? Is
Here.
that just paint or is there a physical structure?
It's
that
just a
would
striped.
express it?
I believe it's just a striped. Striped warning strip.
So there would be nothing beyond the sign that would actually
I
sort
don't
of
think so.
physically discourage or prevent people from turning left?
I don't think so.
That seems to me to be a somewhat tempting left turn for people that are
Yeah,
heading west.
Yeah, we have a similar one in North Amherst at the little plaza there where people are constantly coming out the entrance close to the 5-way intersection where it's clearly labeled entrance only.
There's a circumstance like that at the new Home Depot
Yeah.
going on to Maple.
Except that has sort of a curving
It does,
exit
which
with
is actually
concrete.
something that we might want to consider suggesting actually, is to make it more of a structural impossibility to.
The curve, the western part of that curve sort of curves around to the west in a way that suggests a left turn would be allowed, so maybe it could curve.
I think
the
the
road.
only, I was trying to think of why we didn't do that, and it occurred to me why, was because of fire access. Is that one of the issues or one of their requirements is that they wanted to be able to get a truck across the front of the site? That's right, that was what the issue was, is as soon as you cut this down to a lot more than what it was, it restricted their access to the front. But
Mr. Schreiber?
Curious how the process actually works. Maybe this is a Chris question, but so let's say we all agree that it should be a right-hand exit only, and how is that enforced? That's a police issue then, right?
I don't think it's a police issue. I think it's I don't think the police is going to enforce traffic flow on Atkins Corners property.
So, but once you leave that,
Once they get out of
driveway,
Once they get past the property line, I guess the police could enforce it, but I don't know, the police isn't driving around looking for things like that.
They
Sure,
are
I
in some
noticed that
towns.
at Home Depot they say that strictly enforced. Right.
Strictly enforced,
Yeah, well, there was another one a few years back when they turned, when you first come over the bridge going
Right.
into Hadley, that road by the old Polish American Cafe used to be, people would turn left there, and they turned that into a no left turn situation. People continued to do it for months afterwards, even to the extent of blocking the traffic. I see cringing. But now it's finally no one ever turns there anymore. So, I mean, there are ways to prevent it, but it's not necessarily
We
easy.
put a little cop trap space across where they could sit and they'd be
Pull out,
happy to
right.
catch.
Yeah. Once people get in the habit of turning left there, they're not going to stop.
Yeah, it's
I mean, is there a way? I've seen no left turn signs. I mean, I see that there's that painted median down the middle. Is there a way to stick a no left turn sign right in the middle of that median?
Yeah,
I think that could be.
No, but is there a way for us
I
to?
think that would be dangerous.
Yeah, I guess you
Flood
can.
murders. I was going to say something the town used to do, but I think I remember them saying they don't like to do this now, is to put the cobblestones in the area that serves as a median strip. They have one downtown.
yeah.
That's right.
Would
They're
they
going to
be
do
willing-
that because
it's
hard
not
to
removable.
maintain.
Mm.
You know, but that is an option.
And I know they've done that further down. And I say this is striped. I believe it is, but I'm not 100% certain because I know they do have that cobblestone
Yeah.
detail further down as you approach this.
Could we
It's rounded off.
consider recommending that to the Department of Public Works? Is that possible to do?
Well,
We
then
can do letters to anyone. Mr. Schreiber?
Well, the fact is that if it's a solid line, I'm trying to remember driver's ed, but if it's a solid yellow line, or then you can't cross it. So in fact, it becomes a de facto right turn only. So in other words, if you make a left turn across a solid yellow line, that's against the law.
That's right. So then you'd be on the street, and that was clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from appearances, just on that drawing, it looks like it's actually even a bit more than a solid yellow line there. It looks like it's starting to widen out and have some stripes within it. They get thicker as you approach the roundabout, so that might help cut down on that also.
Would it be fair to say the applicant really has done all they can given the
Oh,
fire
yeah,
codes?
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
not gonna be
It's a
able
town
to.
issue. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so leaving that issue for a moment, can you just address, please, the area, the second area that we had concerns about, which is the area around the entrance to the drive-through? In that particular area, there's traffic coming from several directions. It's coming from I guess only from the primarily from the ATM drive-through and from the service parking lot will be coming out into that area and south. You have the traffic running up and down the front of the building, including people turning left into the drive-through, which, if, as we hope, the drive-through is successful, the line could be fairly long of cars. And then you have people coming in and out of the first 2 rows of parking.
These two, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sort of all converging on that area right there, which also would be the area that pedestrians from those parking spaces would need to cross. And presumably also I see a sidewalk coming down and crossing the drive-through area that would handle pedestrian traffic from, I guess, Hampshire College. It seems like a traffic jam situation there, and also you're saying now that there's going to be, proposed seating. That's where the bike racks are. There's sort of a convergence of traffic around that area, and to me the worrisome part of it is that drive-through traffic line sitting there turning across everything else. Have you given any thought to how that's going to work, or if there might be any way to improve it?
There's no seating proposed, I think.
No.
There's no seating on the outside. Yeah,
Okay.
the outside is strictly just it's the same space that they have now,
I see.
with the exception of addition of a couple bike racks. So there shouldn't be any activity out there beyond what's there now. In terms of overall circulation, yes, we have thought about it quite a bit. And the expectation is that most people coming into this parking lot will come in, are there going to be some that come in this way? Yes, but it's going to be also very easy once this is to come in from this opening down here that, by the time you get here, it's really sort of a mute point. You're already at the store. So given that, cars are going to come in, enter into the parking lot, one of these ways, assuming they're going to the front lot. ATM traffic, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. If it comes in, they can come back in through or go out. The drive-through traffic, I think in the original site plan, we had shown it conceptually as coming through this drive aisle and cutting across. Again, there's no real convenient place to put a stacking aisle for the drive-through lane. The expectation is that, and the anticipation is that most of that traffic will be first thing in the morning. Everybody's getting their cup of coffee and their donuts. Most people who are coming to shop usually come a little bit later. So that was the rationale behind taking it from here, putting it there, is that this line of cars, right now, 1, 2, 3, and we show 2 more here, there's 5 cars. I'm not sure, what the anticipated traffic trips are, but, I'm just thinking about some of the Dunkin' Donut drive-through that get, a lot of traffic. That the gap between cars having to pull out or wait, it's no different than pulling through a busy parking lot at the end of the day, where you've got cars leaving this way and cars are trying to exit out, that somebody's going to stop and let you go through. The time, I can't envision cars being stacked up here bumper to bumper all the way across and not letting anybody through. That there's got to be some common sense for the majority of people. I recognize that if there was a way to configure this such that we could provide the fire access to provide a dedicated stacking lane for each of these, that would absolutely be the the preference. But I don't anticipate the traffic volumes and the the peak hours of this to cause an interruption in the way the rest of this functions, I guess is the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. I guess that addresses our concern with that area. Thank you very much. Any other questions or concerns from the board on, I believe we're discussing conditions 4 and 5 only. And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I have just an administrative question. I was not a member. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with the original vote on this, so do I stay out of this vote?
Yeah, you can weigh in for sure.
I'm gonna move to, I'm sorry. I'll move to approve the site plan, in particular conditions 4 and 5.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much for coming back.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to seeing the finished product.
As I'm sure they are.
Oh, yeah.
Just cruising through this stuff. Next on the agenda, site plan review 2012-00003, M12887. That's 1156 North Pleasant Street, brought by Catherine and Morton Jensen Holm. This is a review of architectural revisions in accordance with conditions 1 and 2 of our site plan review decision. Ms. Brester.
Okay, this is true. I did give you another piece of information from Ms. Jensen Hole that arrived today. So
At the windows?
you can see that in your packets. Yes, thank you.
All right. Again, this is, thank you, Ms. Brester. This is conditions 1 and 2, which are as follows. If exterior architectural changes are proposed, friends, changes to the building envelope, friend, other than in-kind replacement of architectural features, the proposed changes shall be submitted to the planning board in a public meeting for review and approval prior to being constructed or installed. 2. A revised landscape plan amended to include a buffer along the northern boundary shall be submitted to the planning board prior to installation. We have received a letter of agreement between the applicant and the neighbor. It states as follows, and it's dated June 26th, from Don Lesser. Based on the requirements laid out by the planning board, we met with the Jensen Holes to discuss the fence between our property and theirs. We've agreed they will erect a 6-foot wooden fence, similar to a stockade fence, but with flat boards and non-pointed tops, by September 2012. Signed, Don Lesser and Sarah Fisher. Okay. Ms. Jensen Hole.
I haven't bought a new board, but you have all the information here, so I can talk you through. This is the first document you have. So the first two requests are for actual changes to the building envelope, and this will be the first page here. This is showing you the original. It's A. That's the new one. It's the old one. This is
Thank you. We're talking about the packet that came in the mail. It's the third page, for those of you following along.
And it says A, original architectural view. So this is the northern side of the property, and this is how it looked originally. This next page, B, there's the door and the window. I have a diagram. This is what I presented at the last meeting. This was the proposal we made. If you go down to C, we ended up moving the door and keeping the window because we needed the ventilation from this particular window here. And there was room for this door just to move over. What I'm requesting now is that we are able to put an additional opening window, so this will be on the following page, above the door that will be accessed from the mezzanine level inside to provide ventilation for the mezzanine, the living room space. We did have an opening skylight that is now going to have to become a fixed skylight, and you can see that pictured next near the chimney, and it needs to become fixed so that we conform with the plumbing codes, because it's within 10 foot of this stack. So we have to now make that ventilation fixed. So we're requesting this new window to provide ventilation. And I have actually copied the window, the window that I have, existing window. We are putting in exactly the same size window. We'd like to put in the same size window, but it will be an opening double hung style to provide ventilation. So it will look the same as the pre-existing window. So that's the first request on the northern side. The picture below is the southern side of that same area. It's opposite, on the opposite side exactly as the one I just discussed. And at the moment, the picture 2A, this is the pre-existing envelope. This door we are replacing, we had approval to replace it. And we are requesting to put another window for ventilation in. If you go to the next page, B, and it shows the window on the left side of the door. And it would be the same exact type of window and size, double hung window, as the rest of the windows in that side of the building. So that's the second request of additional windows. 3, which is at the bottom of the page, there's a little white outline of the smaller of the 2 skylights. It's a very odd size, and we're trying to find something an exact size that can replace it. But in the event that we have to replace it with a larger skylight, I'm requesting permission to enlarge that skylight. It will, if we do this, it would end up being the same length as the square skylight that is staying in the roof. So just a little bit bigger. Then I'll skip to the new piece of paper that you received in the mail, I believe, yesterday. This is 2 large picture windows. One is in the southern side of the building, and one is in the front of the building. The first picture is the front of the building. It has this detail in wood on the front. The problem with this window is, first of all, it's single pane, so it's losing a lot of heat. It's also deteriorating. All of this woodwork is very old, and it's very dry and brittle. The putty that's holding the windows in is dry and brittle and falling out. And we want to replace this window and the same window on the southern side. The difficulty is knowing what to replace it with. seeing a lot of the buildings in the area that are farmhouses, they have these double hung windows with a join in the middle. So that is a request perhaps that we could replace it with this style window. But I would also request the architects maybe if they had any alternate ideas that I cannot find out. I cannot find out where these. I have not seen these types of windows in any similar farmhouses in the area, and so I am not sure if they are an architectural detail that is unusual or that they were put in at a later date. And I'm wondering if the architects might know that and see if it would be just as good to have this type of window.
Any comments from the architects?
So of the choices, the rebuilding the window would be, I wouldn't rule that out. But of the choices of replacing the windows, personally I would prefer the top one, which is the two double hung windows.
Yes, it's a little small for this.
Yeah.
It would look a little odd, I think. Yes.
I'm also going to echo what Steve says, that in lieu of not saying, of course you can have a window made to look like that. So the issue is perhaps cost, and if you're not saying that that's what you're going to provide, and you're saying it's going to be one of these two, then I also would choose the top one.
So
as being the option.
So my request is, would the board approve of the top one if we were not rebuilding the window?
No one ever asked the lawyers anything. And thank you very much, both of you, for weighing in on that. I don't have any objection to that, anyone? And finally, the fence.
The fence is 72 foot long. There's a tree. It's in the first plan we have. Okay. So here's the street. This is the parking for the neighbors' cars. We have existing trees. We propose a 72-foot fence. This is a very large existing tree, and here's existing shrubbery. And the neighbors have agreed that this is a fine length for them, and they have said if they wanted further, they will put the fence in themselves. But otherwise, this screens their back area, and the fence screens their house here. And you also have photo of the example of the fence that they've agreed upon, and the other neighbours have agreed for the same fence, so that we have the same fence each side.
Small question. Will the
Yes.
fence be painted a color or stain, or how will you keep the
It
fence?
will not be sort of cedar. It will go grey,
Oh,
and both neighbours would like it like
Yeah,
that.
natural.
So yes.
Thank you. There's actually a third piece of what we're addressing tonight, which are condition 3, 4, and 5. Which 4 and 5 actually are the same.
The same.
But it's doubly important. So 3, 4, and 5 are concern the lease for the property. We need to ask that it be revised to include a prohibition of parking on the access road along the front of the property. Section 7 of the lease now provides that 4 parking spaces will be available on the property. No parking permitted on the access road along the front of the property. Cars parked on the access road will be towed at owner's expense. And Section 10, paragraph 2 provides, tenant will keep the porch clean at all times and free of garbage and debris. No folks, sofas, or other indoor upholstery furniture may be kept or used on porches, entryways, lawn, and paved areas. And I thank you for providing language. I've just suggested it to Amherst College to use in their lease in slightly modified form.
So this be used for a lawyer.
So thank you for the small vote of confidence.
Not giving away our secrets.
Okay, I have no issues with any of these conditions being met. Anyone else? Okay, so this is, we'll need a motion to, finding that the applicant has met conditions, 1 through 5. With the provision that if any other exterior architectural changes are proposed, you're going to have to come back.
So moved.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Another unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Appreciate your hard work.
Decisions here, one is for 249 South Pleasant Street, and 2 of them are for 67 Northampton Road. And everyone needs to sign each decision. Mr. Rover needs to sign each decision twice.
Black.
In black, no red pens.
No blue.
I can pass a black pen around. While we're passing this around, anybody want to do a subcommittee report?
We can start with zoning. Okay. So, as you may recall, Mr. O'Keefe is no longer a member of the zoning subcommittee. We're very disappointed about that, and we'll help us persuade him to change his mind. Barring that, it's going to be a little awkward to have 2 members, so we really encourage other members of the planning board to join us or join us as much as possible.
Can I mention the idea? But one idea I had was that if people feel it's just too much of a commitment to join permanently, that we could do 6-month rotations. That people, well, for instance, right now we could use help preparing for fall town meeting, and then after that, if somebody else could take over that slot for the spring town meeting, that would make it easier for people to divvy up the responsibilities. But it would be helpful to have a 3rd person.
Mr. Rosner?
I thought we had a discussion about this following the town meeting, and the idea of restructuring the zoning subcommittee, I thought had a lot of support. I would suggest that we put this on an upcoming agenda, assume for a meeting soon to occur, as a discussion item for restructuring the zoning subcommittee. The idea being that perhaps 2 or 3 people might work on one project, 2 or 3 people might work on a different project, or maybe there are some other ideas. I don't know. But I do recall that we had a discussion about this following town meeting, recent town meeting. And I thought that was how we were headed. Did I misperceive that?
Mr. Crown?
We did start to have that discussion, but in the absence of making a decision, we are proceeding with business as usual. So yeah, I think we're open to restructuring, but the business is still going on, so we need to proceed. So that's why I'm saying that.
I understand.
Mr. Schreiber?
I'm sorry, I had to step out. What are we? Pardon me?
We were talking about the composition of the zoning subcommittee, in particular the fact that there's an open seat.
Okay.
And while you were gone, we nominated you too. So.
And we all voted unanimously.
Yeah.
So there's sort of mixed discussion about the makeup and construction and the operation, really, of the zoning subcommittee in light of Mr. O'Keefe's departure therefrom. And we did agree to talk about it at a later date. It being relatively early, I would suggest that now is the time to do so. Only Sandra Anderson is missing tonight. I think that's okay. We have almost everyone here. And I would be, maybe we move ahead to, maybe we table that until we get to that portion of the meeting. We get to a couple other things first, and then we'll address that. Because I think that it might help to have our report on the zoning forum and where things stand and what the existing priorities are before we try to address the structure of the board. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Especially if we're talking about dividing up responsibility. Okay. Any other subcommittee reports?
One, I'd like to add on our list of subcommittees, the new Housing and Shelter Committee, which I'm the planning board liaison to. This happened 5 minutes ago or a little more. And I went to what was their second meeting today, my first meeting attending Housing and Shelter Committee. So I can report on it when it comes up, but we just need to pick that up on our list. This is one of
Okay, it shall be added. Ms. Brester?
Mr. Weber had suggested at one point not having reports from all committees at every meeting, and I wondered if you wanted to set a pattern for that so that I would have, an indication of what I should put on the agenda, or do you want to just always have them on the agenda and then, every other time say, well, we don't have time for that, or we heard from that last time, or how do you want to handle this?
Well, I think my preference would be to, instead of going through them one by one, which we certainly can do, it only takes a minute. My preference would be to ask if there are any subcommittee reports, and anyone who has a report can speak up, and then we will move on.
Seems like a good plan.
Yes, Mr. O'Keefe?
Two minor points on that. Just to be pedantic, we're actually talking about liaison reports and not subcommittees, of which we only have one subcommittee.
Thank you. Yes.
And the other thing is, I had a while ago in passing made a suggestion on the agenda that we include a parenthetical notation after the subcommittee that indicated who the liaison, or not subcommittee, the committee that indicated who the liaison was. Particularly in the case where the chair is absent and the vice chair might happen to be running the meeting, and he's a little bit less familiar with the personnel involved. But it also helps him, as we're all looking around saying who's here and who's not, to help understand who is available to make those reports.
That argument would have more weight if the vice chair hadn't actually been on the board longer than the chair.
Yes.
But point taken. I think that if it's not too much trouble for you, Chris, to add the name of, paste them in once as to who's what liaison, that would actually probably be helpful in terms of us asking questions of each other as well.
And shall I just leave them on the agenda and then we'll deal with them each time as we do them together?
I think so.
Okay.
Is that all right? Sure. So, any other liaison reports?
I was just going to make a suggestion that it would be helpful if the liaisons could actually write up something in advance of the meeting that gets distributed with the, the agendas, and then there's no need necessarily. Then the discussion is just on the written part.
Well, you've certainly been a leader in that department, and I thank you for it. I think you're the only one besides the only liaison that I've seen submit actual written materials in advance of the meeting, so thank you. I think it's a great idea.
I just, for practicality, it's nice to get things to me by Thursday of the week that I'm sending out packets so that I can copy things and put them in the packets. Okay.
All right.
If you can't get it to me by then, you can just email it to me, and then I will email it to the board. But then we end up with kind of a mess like we had tonight, and I apologize for that.
So if anyone is submitting comments on their liaison report in advance of the meeting, please do so by Thursday prior to the meeting. Yes, Ms. Ford.
So, it'll be interesting for me to consider that, given that Ms. Brestrup here does a wonderful job doing minutes of design review board. And so how do I, I don't, I'd like to be able to, consider coordinating with you on this, and I don't want to be doubling up efforts. It's kind of crazy that we would both be writing things.
There's
out
no,
here.
I don't think anyone's suggesting that you're required to do it. I think it's just if you want to, it could be helpful.
Yeah, and some of them have other means of doing it. Like
Yep.
you have good means for doing it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It would
So-
save us time, agenda, especially on nights when we go over it, we at least would have had the written.
Yep, then at least we've gotten an update. I agree. And although a lot of things are available on the town website already as far as minutes from other boards. So, yes.
I could just include the agenda for the design review board
Mm-hmm.
in your packets. The agenda for the most recent meeting, and then if anybody wanted to talk about it.
Well, and for instance, we had a meeting last night. Now that wasn't a typical meeting, or that was,
No.
usually they're staggered, but, we had a special meeting last night, so there wouldn't have been any way to get you information.
All right, I think this discussion I don't think is going anywhere.
Okay.
Nothing to do with you personally, Miss Ford. I'm just thinking that at this
No,
point
I
it's
totally, I'm with you there, I really am.
Okay, all right. Okay, summer schedule. We received a chart of the dates available. I am not actually available on July 11th, but all the rest of them I am. The regular dates that we would meet on, all of which appear to have a quorum up through the end of August, are July 18th, August 1st, and August 15th. We wouldn't normally meet on the 29th, even though it's bolded, because it would be the third meeting. To some extent, any of this will depend on our workload as far as permitting goes, so maybe you could give us an update on what's coming up.
I know of some things that are in the works, but nothing has yet been submitted. So I don't know when they will be submitted, and I don't know when they'll be coming along.
Okay.
So we do have set meeting nights or not? Or are we waiting? That's I can understand that.
Meeting nights.
We do have set meeting nights. July 18th, well, we're not meeting on July 4th. It's a
Right.
national holiday. So the only meeting in July will be on July 18th.
Okay.
And unless we change our schedule, we will also meet on August 1st and August 15th.
Okay, so I'll miss the first with it. Oh, well.
Yes.
Do you want to go ahead?
No, you Bruce and I have a joint proposal.
Mr. Carson?
Richard and I would like to invite everybody to a cookout and swimming party on July the 25th at my house and his house.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Okay. The idea being that Bruce and Joe have a wonderful swimming pool, and hopefully it'll be a nice warm day that day.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Right? And then after that, go across the street to our place, which I guess is a little bigger, and also you can park there at our place.
Sure.
And we can accommodate everybody for a pop-up.
That sounds a little dangerous. Will you have a crosswalk installed?
If hiring the police
Well,
officer.
painted yellow
Will it be
lines.
marked?
You're not.
Patched?
Oh, I know, and we're not going to be parking on the lawn, are we?
Maybe.
Oh,
I'll bring myself
oh
with
dear. July 25th, huh?
July 25th. Thank you so much for the invitation.
After you mentioned it, don't you have some upholstered furniture out there?
Oh, yeah,
Not
yeah.
upholstered. Just lawn furniture.
Unfortunately,
What day of the week
I'm
is
gonna miss it.
It's a Wednesday.
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 I'm gonna be in Texas, but I would have loved to come.
Oh.
Sorry.
We thought it might be best to pick a Wednesday.
We thought
Yeah,
Wednesday,
no,
because
it's a
that's when we
great
usually meet anyway.
It's so nice.
Well,
Including with Brestrup and.
Oh, and family members and spouses are invited.
Right,
Yes.
Oh, very
Related or unrelated?
yes.
Well, as long as it's no more than four.
No more than
Four
four.
unrelated.
Don't pay more than four.
Yes.
Do you want to send around an invite by email to
We
all?
will. We will.
Okay, thank you.
With directions.
That's-
And
yeah.
can I just verify, we need 6 for quorum? Is that correct? Or
Well,
five?
it's 5 for site plan review.
5 for site plan review, okay. Because I just want to note that on the 15th, there's always an outside chance that I will not be able to make that. I'm going to be out of the country until the 14th. I'm flying back the 14th, and just in case.
Something happens with me from
Rico?
Peru. The first and 15th I'll be here.
Who's going?
Oh, Rob. So Rob will be here on the 15th as well.
Oh,
And the first.
21st.
Yeah. I wasn't sure at the time.
Oh, yeah, I just embarrassed the excuse that I wanted to go there for my whole life. Oh, yeah.
And as time goes along, you can fill me in on when you'll be here in September.
Right. Yeah, we're not there yet.
Yeah, not there.
So, Mr. Chair, was the suggestion that we're scheduling our regularly scheduled meetings on the 1st and the 15th of August, with the possibility of cancellation if we don't have sufficient business that warrants timely action?
Well said. Yes.
Mm.
I agree. I think that's correct. Well, we need to notice them in advance,
Yes,
as you know.
yes.
So let's, I think, plan on having those so that we have the option open. If we have applicants coming in, we can get to them timely. And if we don't, then we will have a nice Wednesday night off.
Sure. That's good.
But might that depend on how much work there is for fall town meeting, that the board itself is gonna have to work on, depending on that restructuring and we haven't gotten to yet.
Oh, sure. Spoil our fun.
I was like, time off.
So, yes, any business would necessitate a meeting, right?
I didn't just remember.
That's the parade's on the 4th. We're not meeting that night. Topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours prior to the meeting.
No such topics.
Okay. Planning board rules and regulations. You should have in your packet, or I think it was delivered today. Jonathan Tucker and I have been going back and forth on some ideas for amending the planning board rules and regulations. Specifically with respect to, we talked about this at our last meeting, I believe, that we normally require a copy of a lease with any residential use that's going to be used as a rental. And so we had talked about possibly including in our planning board rules and regulations, the requirement that a lease be submitted. And I took the liberty of including our the provision about no sofas in this. Because it's our rules, we can put it in there and require it. So I propose that we put it in there. So this would be section B5N of the planning board rules and regulations would be added that says, for any residential rental use, submittal of a copy of the lease to be used, which lease shall provide as follows. Tenants will keep any outdoor areas free of debris at all times. No sofas or other indoor upholstery furniture may be kept or used on any porches, entryways, lawns, driveways, sidewalks, or any other paved or unpaved outdoor areas. Second, that we also require applicants to submit a completed dwelling unit, and this is on the back side, dwelling unit registration form and emergency notification pursuant to the rental property registration regulations of the Amherst Board of Health. Currently, we do have in this town a rental property registration system. Anybody renting out any type of apartment or residence of any kind is supposed to register it with the Board of Health. There's a registration fee of $10, and the fine for noncompliance is $10 per month. For each month the application isn't kept up to date. That registration form requires the name of the owner and the property manager on it. Correctly. It doesn't require that the tenants be listed. But it serves as a registration system for the police and neighbors, if necessary, to contact the owners of the house to address any problems caused by tenants. I discussed this with Mr. Tucker. We didn't see any reason we couldn't include these in our planning board regulations as far as what needs to be submitted to us. So the proposal would be to amend Article 2, Section 3, Subsection B for site plan review submittals to add the requirements as shown below, as we just discussed. Any comments, questions, or concerns about that? Additional things you'd like to add? Mr. O'Keefe?
I have a couple of comments. One of them was, and I think this is a good idea, I was wondering whether it was a good idea to require specific language versus requiring language to the effect of. In particular, when dealing with somebody like Amherst College or the university that might have standard lease provisions that aren't worded necessarily in the exact way that it's worded here, whether we would accept some alternate wording that had the same effect but didn't contain the words that we've listed here. That might be a little bit more flexible.
So we could change it. I would agree with that, I guess, if somebody's got similar language, but I mean, the no sofas piece of it is kind of essential. So.
Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Ford, you have anything?
Can't we just do it like we do in architectural specifications and say or approved equal, something of that?
What is the language that you use?
Or approved equal language, or or approved
or equivalent,
or equivalent
approved language,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something on
just to make it sound
yes.
Or equivalent
approved
language approved by the
By the
board.
board.
Mr. Schreiber.
So I have no problem with the second part. In fact, I support the second part, which is the dwelling unit registration and emergency notification. I'm having a harder time with the SOFA part, and for a number of reasons. One is that ultimately it's the property owner's responsibility to keep the property clear, and how they want to do that is up to basically is up to them. But that's their responsibility to make sure that the tenants park correctly, that the property is kept debris free, and I believe that there's a default Board of Health requirement anyway that upholstery furniture can't be kept outdoors. So I'm reluctant to use this particular document to start to try to make law, or to try to, because first of all, it's not really enforceable. In other words, they could put in a lease, but it's nothing that we can actually, enforce. It opens up a can of, a big. What else should we put in there? I mean, there's a bunch of other things that we could put in there. So I guess I'm really reluctant to use this particular instrument for that particular purpose, even though I think it's a great idea, just because I think for those reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Mr.
I was going to say exactly what he said.
Mr. Kruger?
just pursuing that a little. It wasn't no sofas earlier, dirt upholstered furniture, kept any porches, entryways. What about when you have a three-season porch or an enclosed porch? Or, I mean, it's not always 100% true. I know what we're trying to improve on is that look of the sort of, where you sit, with furniture being brought out and kind of strewn across an outdoor porch that's visible. But this really would eliminate any upholstered sofa type thing on any kind of porch, even in a very well kept up type of screened in enclosed entry. It doesn't allow it at all, regardless of the condition or structure.
Sport?
So I hear what everybody's saying, and I appreciate that that this might not be an appropriate place for this. On the other hand, how are any of these other items enforceable? I mean, so where do you draw the line here? I mean, why would we even say any of these other things? Right? Why would we make these conditions and not be able to make something like this? It's a rhetorical question, I know, but I think it's important to understand kind of the context that we're making these recommendations.
Ms. Brestrup.
Well, I was just going to say that the building enforcement, the building commissioner has access to the site management plan, and he would be able to see hours of operation, number of seats for patrons, all these other things that are in the site management plan, and be able to say, well, you're not living up to your management plan. But he wouldn't necessarily be in the position of enforcing the lease, which is an agreement between the landowner and the tenant. So I just wanted to clarify that those are two sort of separate types of documents. The management plan stays in the file and is connected with the site plan approval, so the building commissioner can enforce that. Or I've seen him be able to enforce that. I have not seen him try to enforce a provision of a lease, but
Well, I think that a lease, of course, is an agreement, a contract between the landlord and the tenant. And if a provision is included in the lease and requires something, the tenant to do or not do something, or the landlord to do or not do something, that becomes a provision that's enforceable between the two of them. So in other words, I guess my point with trying to put this into the planning board rules is this is something that comes up time and again in our discussions with the citizens of Amherst about the problems that arise with rental housing and what can we do about it. And so this is something that it seems to me that we can do right away. It brings awareness of the landlord who's proposing the use that requires site plan review or special permit to consider this issue and to include it in their lease. That brings it to the attention of the tenants. And okay, so I guess it's whether the building commissioner can enforce it or whether it's added as a condition under our site plan review. Anything I think that we can do to try and mitigate some, you honk, we drink is a problem, right? And if we can do anything to try to mitigate that, my question is, why don't we do it in the context of cutting it off even before they come to us and say, you have to include this before we'll look at your application? Mr. O'Keefe.
Two things. I'm not personally concerned with the enforcement aspect of it because I do think that this has to be considered in the context of where it is in our rules and regulations. This is what we're requiring the applicant to submit to us as part of their application. We're requiring, A, that they submit a lease because we're interested in the lease in general, and we would be requiring that, B, the lease specifically include these provisions. That's all they have to do from our perspective. They have to submit a lease that says such and such or its equivalent. The enforcement, as the chair stated, is entirely between the two parties that sign that contract. We're not part of that discussion. But so I see that as basically us encouraging or in fact requiring best practices for the landlord to include, to create a lease that includes at least some provisions that are designed to protect both the property and the neighborhoods around it. So I think that enforcement is not really our problem, but that it is good for us to enforce the requirement that the lease include a provision like this. The second point I wanted to make was in agreement with Ms. Kruger's point that perhaps the language is a little bit too broad, and my suggested mechanism for improving that would be to consider making the division basically between uncovered areas and covered areas. If you have a covered porch, whether it's a 3-season porch or a covered front porch where it's not raining on your upholstered furniture, that's more or less okay. If it's sitting out in any area where it's not covered, whether it's a porch or a patio or a lawn or a driveway or in the swimming pool or anywhere else, then that's not appropriate. So basically if it's covered, it's okay. If it's not covered, it's not. I'm not sure how you would word that.
Mr. Russell.
Yeah, I like the idea, and while I might have some concerns about some of the language, like Mr. O'Keefe, I do agree with what Mr. O'Keefe just said. It's not our purview to be involved with enforcement of it, but we do have to start someplace, or we should start someplace, and this is a good place to start. If it turns out that this is not enough, and even a more direct means of enforcement, such as putting it into a bylaw or an ordinance is necessary, then that might be the next step. But this is certainly a good place to start, and it is responsive to what we've heard from a lot of residents of the town. I'm not so concerned about the difficulty of enforcing it. I agree with what our chair said about how the lease becomes a contractual relationship. But I do agree also that perhaps some language about the porches, or for that matter, the very last part of it, any other paved or unpaved outdoor areas. I don't know that we even need the word other paved or unpaved. Just any outdoor areas would be sufficient for me, but that's a minor point. But I sort of, regarding one detail, I kind of disagree about eliminating any kind of even if it's a covered porch, because I think most porches are covered. And I think leaving of sofas outdoors, even on covered porches in winter, is one of the problems that we're trying to address here. But I'm not quite sure what language we can use to address Ms. Kruger's concerns, which I think are valid.
Mr. Schreiber?
I think that the Board of Health concern really has to do with the outdoorsness, not the coveredness. So in other words, in other words, the potential for burrowing animals so the cover I don't think is as much of an issue. But
perhaps the screenedness.
Enclosure. So there are a lot of concerns. I'm sorry.
Please go on.
I may continue to ramble here. There are a lot of concerns. Noise. We honk, we drink. So probably even a greater complaint is noise. So and there are nuisance laws in Amherst. So why wouldn't we also list those? So in other words, I think a much better way of handling this would be to make reference to the rental lease and then have an attachment to that, which has some of the things that we'd like to see included, including reference to the Amherst nuisance laws, references to specific Board of Health laws.
I think that has a lot of merit to it. I mean, I felt like we need to just start somewhere, and there was talk about revising it to include requiring a lease, and it kind of opened the door, as far as I'm concerned, to not only requiring a lease, but setting some of the terms that lease has to include for things where we're going to be permitting it. So, Ms. Kruger?
Well, along those lines, I think it was right. It was appropriate that we asked Amherst College to give a sample lease, but then in reading it and reviewing it, we don't have any real criteria to know what we're reviewing. Right. Usually, when I'm reviewing that kind of a lease and a rental agreement, I'm looking for sections that say if the tenant is, charged with a noise violation or certain, things that you're talking about, Board of Health, that it gives the property owner the right to evict or terminate the tenancy, and there was none of that sort of behavior.
In fact, at this point, I think that we might table this amendment until we can come up with some more. And if we want to reference sample provisions of a lease as a separate document, that would be fine too. We could also just list them as subsections of N under this too. But I mean, to me, I'd like to see submissions from anybody who has suggestions about how to structure this.
Those leases are out there. Some of the better landlords and management companies have that. And I know Attorney Farber has lots of samples of very strict leases that give the property owner the right to, sort of take action. But so just about maybe collecting some of that to look at.
All right. So, Mr. P.
So two more things. The one thing is that the lease that we saw from the Jensen Holes in particular, I thought was quite a good lease and had a bunch of points that might be worthy of emulation. But I would just urge a bit of caution for us not to go too far down that road, because the risk there is that we then create a set of requirements that potentially become objectionable to the landlords and that they won't want to inquire. If we have a laundry list of provisions that they have to have in their leases, you have to find the line between being protective and creating a situation that's objectionable for one party.
So I guess what you're saying is I guess that we need to scrutinize leases more closely than we have been. The board, needs to take responsibility for the lease as being a key component of what we're looking at in site plan review for residential rental uses, correct? And I absolutely agree with that. And I think that, it would be nice to kind of flag our site plan review criteria in the appropriate place to say, okay, have we looked at the lease? Does it address the following issues? So this needs more work.
More criteria based rather than you shall have this language, and this. Right. Have you addressed
noise,
Yeah.
sofas,
Violations of town bylaws,
animal noises, what have
criminal
you.
behavior.
Right. Okay. Ms. Brestro.
I think you probably know this already, but I just wanted to tell everyone else that when you do decide that you want to change the rules and regs, you're going to need to hold a public hearing. It needs to be notified, noticed, 14 days in advance, etc., just like a normal public hearing.
I think that I can't imagine any widespread opposition to this type of thing, but I suppose it could be, so we'll definitely, let's try and, should we, Mr. Schreiber?
Is there a way of bringing the new housing enforcement officer into this discussion?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, in fact, let's invite him. He addressed us briefly at one point, but he didn't, he only had a minute or two.
Yeah.
It would be really great to have his expertise on what are the areas that we should be looking at. Shall we schedule something for that? Say, it would depend on his availability now. I think it's a great idea to have him in to discuss this at a public hearing.
Should I ask him when he's available in August?
Yeah, would you mind? And we'll see if we can't schedule a public hearing in August on this issue.
So I would just suggest that if we're going to talk to him, that we do that in advance of the public hearing.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
the public hearing is when we have to officially notice the changes that we propose to make, and we would want to involve him in the discussion about what those changes would be.
Right. So we'll need to meet with him first,
Yeah.
and then have a public hearing.
What about
On
our
a
July
later night.
18th meeting?
Hmm?
Our July 18th meeting?
Yeah, if he's available. It's one of the biggest issues we're facing as a board, so I see it as a high priority. Okay, moving on.
Do you want to know what other things are on your agenda for July 18th?
Oh, sure.
You have the PVPC coming in to talk to you about transfer of development rights and the a model solar and wind bylaw. Chris Curtis has been working with staff in the planning department to develop a transfer of development rights bylaw. It's not entirely clear that it's going to be an easy task. There are a number of questions that we have, but at least he will give you an overall explanation of what it's all about and how it might be implemented in Amherst. And then Amir McChee, who is the owner of Auto Express down in the
It's McCatchy.
Mikachi, is that how you say it? Okay. At the intersection of East Street and Belchertown Road. He would like to talk to you about a proposal for developing mixed-use buildings or apartments on the other side of Southeast Street, where he owns some property at 143 Southeast Street. They're currently little houses, and he wants to tear those down and build a 3-story mixed-use building. Then the people from the Community Development Committee want to come back and talk to you about strategies for their public process for the CDBG grant application, just like they did last year. They enlisted you to help them hold a public hearing. I think they intend to hold a public hearing this year, but they would like to get your advice and recommendations and possibly have you attend their public hearing. So they want to talk about that. And then Connie had brought up the issue of scheduling a discussion about housing, and I just put schedule a discussion.
And I think that what you brought up in the changing our regulations is a piece of that. It's one piece the board can do it.
So whether you would actually discuss housing on that night or just talk about when you would do that, I don't know what that.
It's a fairly broad topic.
Yeah, I had hoped to kind of come up with some bullet points that the board might want to focus on, because when we talked about it very briefly, we had some ideas about talking to the colleges or the university and how to shape that, and I hoped to kind of maybe do some kind of outline about how we might approach it, and I haven't yet, because it was too broad for this board to just jump in.
So I will leave a general discussion about that on the agenda, a general discussion about when you might want to talk about it and how you might want to structure it.
I'm going to try and frame the discussion.
During the discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what you have on the agenda for the 18th, and I will add John
good.
Thompson if he's available.
Yeah.
Sort of fits in with the housing.
It does.
And I'll
Yeah.
come up with kind of a.
It'll be housing night at the planning board. Okay. Topics not reasonably anticipated. A&Rs. Upcoming ZBA applications.
CBA. Let's see, I just have a list here in front of me, and it seems I've lost it. The ZBA has a number of things that are coming before them. I think I brought up some of these things to you already. And where is that list? Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, no, I just had it. Did I talk to you about Marymore Cathcart, the person who has the Procopa tub? She wants to vacate that space and open a design studio and a retail store at 534 Main Street, which is the building that Valley Frameworks is in, and also FT Fitness. So is that anything that you're interested in?
Oh, I would be, but is it going to go in where the community arts center used to be?
Yes. It's going to go in the building has two pieces, and then there's a house next to it, and it's going to go in the corner where the two pieces come together.
So now where the community arts used to be?
I'm not sure.
I think it is.
It is.
It is.
So basically use that as is?
I
So
think
there's
they're
not
gonna
doing any exterior changes?
I don't think they're going to do any
Okay.
exterior changes.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Fred Hartwell wants to talk about reconfiguring his parking plan at 60 North Whitney Street. Is that anything that you're interested in?
The
He's
high
got a
North Whitney,
subdividable dwelling there. I think I talked to you about this
Is
earlier.
that work currently under progress? The reconfiguring the driveway?
I don't know. His
No.
public hearing is coming up on July 12th.
There's a lot of bulldozers in that area.
Had their driveway came.
Bonnie Smith wants to rescind approval for a flag lot to change its taxable status because she doesn't like being taxed for a buildable lot. She would prefer to have one lot, taxed for one lot rather than being taxed for two. So she's coming to have that special permit taken away. And Valerie Hetzel, is that anything you're interested in?
Is that it's not an A&R though? Approval lot? Reverse A&R?
Maybe eventually, yes. If she gets
Form a
approval
new lot.
from the ZBA. And then Valerie Hetzel on Adams Street. And you remember Adams Street from last year? You declared it to be a street to provide access. She would like to take her garage and convert it into a dwelling unit. So is that anything you're interested in seeing?
So that would be creating a single-family house into a two-family house?
She has a single-family house on the property, and she has a garage that is currently undergoing some renovation, and she would like to create a second dwelling unit
But
in the garage.
if it's less than 800 square feet, then it's considered the
Yes.
apartment that
Yeah.
that you can do by right.
Well,
Correct.
that's a supplemental apartment. This would be a converted dwelling.
Oh, she wants to convert
It's in a
it.
different section of the bylaw.
So does that become a duplex then?
No,
No,
it
it's just
becomes
a two-family.
a house with a converted dwelling and a detached structure.
Oh, so it's detached garage.
Detached,
Oh, I see.
yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Leave it to the ZBA.
Okay, so
Leave it
none
to
of
the
those,
ZBA.
no ZBA reviews.
Upcoming site plan review.
We do not have any new applications, thank goodness.
I need to take a short break before we move to the zoning forum stuff, so take 5.
30.
Of information that was sent to you by citizens as well as by Mr. Tucker.
Yes. The next item on our agenda is the Planning Board Subcommittee report. As Mr. O'Keefe pointed out, we only have one subcommittee, and that's the zoning subcommittee. Tonight they're going to report to us on the zoning forum and discussion on how to proceed. We're going to have a discussion on how to proceed with the village center rezoning. So,
Okay, so I'll as Ms. Prestoff said, we've got a packet of comments that we got at the zoning forum. I would characterize the comments from people who attended as encouraging us to set aside village centers and concentrate on residential rental issues. And a sub-theme that emerged from my perception was that people wanted to wait for studies to be done about housing and traffic and so on. Also before any large-scale zoning goes forward, whether it's in the village center or the downtown. So those comments were collected for you, and you should read them. There was, in attendance at the zoning forum, there was, I would say there was predominance of people who were opposed to immediate work on village centers. There was a couple people there who wanted us to move forward on village centers, and we also got a memo from Cindy Jones specifically dealing with North Amherst and proposing that we incorporate transfer of development rights into a North Amherst rezoning proposal in the future. So in response to the zoning forum, planning staff prepared a revised work plan, proposed revised work plan, which I don't think you actually got, because I misunderstood Mr. Tucker's request earlier today. Anyway, the planning staff is working on a package of residential use amendments, residential rental use amendments, including possible amendments to both single-family and duplex uses, to clarifying language around converted dwellings, clarifying and possibly tightening language about lodging and boarding house. These are all residential use that are associated with rental, student rental use. They're also working on combining or flushing out the mixed use and live work. As you recall, we were proposing to add a new use category as part of form-based code called live work. That is actually interesting and possibly useful regardless of whether we rezone and adopt form-based code. So we're going to pull that out, or they are attempting to pull it out and possibly fold it into mixed use somehow, maybe make some subcategories there. Also talking about rental registration and functional family. These are all things that will impact residential use. So there's a package of things that are being worked on, and either this board or the zoning subcommittee will evaluate at some point when drafts are ready, which ones we should pursue or which ones are not worth pursuing right now. So in addition to that, a number of other issues were raised in the course of discussions about village centers over the last year or so. Issues that are important in their own right and possibly should be approached, again, regardless of whether or not we rezone village centers and or adopt form-based code. And those include possibly extending the demolition delay for historic preservation. We're going to ask for a comment or recommendation from the Historical Commission about that. Adopting or working on sustainable and alternative energy and low impact development requirements. This actually goes back to development modifications. These are things that are important, and people want them, and we should have them in the zoning bylaw. But what exactly it'll cover, that's still being worked on. There's also transfer of development rights, which is not necessarily related to village centers, but will of course be wrapped up in discussions about density and housing. And finally, there's there's floodplain conservancy remapping and rezoning. That's something that is important in both North Amherst and South Amherst, and it's something that the town's been working on for a while, but is not quite ready. But it's something that is related to village centers, but can be done separately and should be done separately. We're also pursuing encouraging or promoting private student housing away from neighborhoods somehow, possibly on University Drive. If there's a way to encourage on the west side of University Drive where there's some lots there. It's wet, but it's also probably will draw less fire. And finally, an issue that came out of Village Center form-based code, we were going to add language that would allow agricultural processing to the use language that would allow it to one of the use categories. That's still important, and again, whether or not North Amherst or South Amherst ever gets rezoned, it's something that we might want to have on the books. So each of those things are things that we might work on in lieu of village center rezoning or alongside village center rezoning. That's what we want the board to consider what it should pursue. Evidently, I didn't hear it, but evidently the town manager at town meeting recommended or promised or suggested that North Amherst not be brought back to the fall town meeting until the various studies are done. Anyone who's in town meeting could possibly fill me on that. I don't know.
That's what I heard. I wonder if he said that at the select board meeting.
Okay, maybe
No,
that's what it
it's
is.
no, it's in the town meeting. It's in the town meeting and it's on tape, so.
Yeah, so
I went to every town meeting, I didn't hear that.
okay, so that's something that we need to clarify. But anyway, we might consider not doing the North Amherst this fall, but looking more long range for that. Whether the town manager might want us to do that. Certainly, a lot of people who voted against village center zoning wanted to see studies done before that comes back. So, so those are the things that we talked about today. We talked about things that might be done instead of pursuing form-based code and or village centers right now. We didn't really make a recommendation, Bruce and I, although we both strongly believe that we want to work on these residential rental use amendments in some form. So
Do you want to work on that?
we would like to. We do think that the package of residential use amendments that will impact rental uses is something that is important and should be a high priority of the planning board. Whether anything will be ready for the fall, we hope that it will be, but right now it's not, there's nothing that we are actually working on. I mean, there's no draft in front of us. The planning staff is working on something.
Mr. Carson. We also talked tonight at the meeting about inviting the new chancellor at the university to attend a planning board meeting at some point to talk about these housing needs and the real crisis that people in the town are feeling with the university expanding and not enough housing on the campus, to make him aware of this issue, and also to find out if the university has any other thoughts about providing private student housing or working with the town in some way to alleviate this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. And Mr. Croner, any more report issues? No. So we'll hear from the board as far as where anybody who wants to weigh in on any aspect of where we go with any type of rezoning. Screw it.
I've been really struggling with kind of balance people's really legitimate concerns about what's the impact on neighborhoods of this kind of conversion of houses to student rental, and what we've all heard, and we've sort of been under, and certainly set back some other parts of, I think, a really good planning board agenda. But what I worry about is that we're in a reactive mode, and we're tightening up a bunch of rules that if other things were in balance, we wouldn't really be looking at it. I don't like putting prohibitions on conversions or building duplexes. I think those are really good land use options.
Mm-hmm.
I in a much broader sense, support by right duplex development or ways to use land more efficiently and have more people live together instead of just having our subdivision development form. So even with this, that partly my objection to the changing the parking bylaw, leading to kind of creating a town where we're very rigid and really lock down what things people might want to do because we're reacting to the very real student housing issue and pressure that we have. And there may be some other things to look at before we start tinkering with taking away, having everything be owner occupied, and all the sort of menu that we've been looking at. So I have a problem with super rigid regulation. I'm almost done. Years ago, we looked at what I would call a true rental registration system. What we have now is if you're renting, you pay $10 and we want to know who you are and how to reach you. But in my mind, the most effective solution is a rental registration system where if you're in violation, you have a hefty fine and your right to rent is able to be taken away. And we don't have that.
Right.
It failed at town meeting years ago, but I think the college towns that have been really effective in controlling student behavior off campus have a very vigorous rental registration system. And I would rather have that in place and working than kind of nibbling around the edges and making everything so restrictive that we're just reacting to that one issue. We can't do anything anymore in Amherst. Just put that out there.
That's a good point, Mr. Carson.
I understand what you're saying, but I think people really feel there's a crisis right now. I mean, they can see daily the houses in their neighborhood changing ownership and being occupied by students. And my point in talking about possibly rezoning University Avenue for student housing is that this is a multi-pronged problem, and we do need more private student housing, but in the meantime, I think some of these other efforts might be needed, even if they're temporary, until there is more housing available in general and more types of housing. I think the problem now is that all the new housing for students is single-family houses. And that's probably the town's fault for not allowing more types of housing all these years, but that's what happened and that's the past. But I think we've got to approach different fronts right now.
Sure.
I'm just going to respond, but I don't want to dominate. I want to hear other people. I hear your point, but we really failed to do that in the village center rezoning, and it wasn't just for students, but we have, every time we tighten up and make something more stringent, that stays on the books. People will pass things that are very protective. What we really have a hard time with is identifying growth and development areas, and I don't think we've been able to do that, even with the help of the master plan. we have failed to be able to designate those areas. And I'm worried we'll do the tightening up, that will stay in the books, and we will fail in identifying where the appropriate growth areas are. So that's what I understand.
It's true. If you squeeze it in one place, it'll pop up somewhere else, right? So, yeah. How do you? I mean, it isn't even really a student rental problem. It's a student behavior more than anything else. How can you address behavior through zoning? I mean, zoning is about land use. It's difficult.
It's a landlord problem.
If you want to be recognized, I'll take comments in a few minutes, okay? Mr. O'Keefe?
So I totally agree with Ms. Kruger's points that one of the most effective tools that we have to deploy or might be able to deploy is a robust rental registration system. We don't have that now, and the town is taking steps to work toward that. That's not, strictly speaking, a zoning issue as such, so it's a little bit out of our hands, and we're relying on other entities within town government to carry that forward. So partially, in my mind, it's a question of what should we be doing? Should we be waiting for that to happen? Should we be doing other things that Ms. Kruger characterized as nibbling around the edges? Should we be working on some of these other issues? I think there's a fairly broad agreement that a rental registration system that works and is enforced and effective is vitally needed in town. I think I haven't really heard anybody object to that, and we've heard lots of comments on lots of issues. So I would really like to see that. I think lots of other.
What sections of town town government are working on that?
That's there's a initiative underway being led by our town manager, John Musanti, that he's characterizing as safe and healthy neighborhoods that addresses behavior issues much more than, as you said, just a student rental issue. And so Mr. Tucker spoke at some length at our zoning subcommittee meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago at the zoning forum, and outlined some of the efforts that are underway there. But in large part, they revolve around a revitalized capacity we have in the inspections department now with a new building commissioner and a new inspections officer that we've never had before, who's only at this point, it needs to be borne in mind, been on the job full time for a matter of weeks. He hasn't been around that long, he's been working part time. So, but already, Mr. Tucker indicated to us, and this was a couple of weeks ago, that there was already starting to be some visible indications of his effectiveness in that role. So, I very much look forward to being able to have a conversation with him in the future, bringing him in to talk about some of these issues. That we can get more details about what we can do as a planning board versus what needs to be done by the select board, Board of Health, and other entities that are involved in sort of regulating student life and rental life, and not just behavior issues, not just zoning issues, but just kind of the broader aspects of what happens in rental property. So that's not something that we can do alone, but I think that we do have some part in it, and that we need to work with other both boards and parts of town hall, staff in town.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. Mr. Schreiber?
Oh, I went to the zoning forum, and I was actually struck. One thing that really struck me was the number of comments about so-called by right conversion of single-family houses to duplexes, which a number of speakers spoke about that. But just in exchanging emails with Chris, my 3.5 years on the board, I could count 4, so-called by right conversions, because they would have to come still to the planning board, so they're for site plan review. And 2 of those were by Amherst College. So, and the other 2 were really, one was a grandfathering of an existing use. So there is something happening, changing of housing, but it's not the by right conversion of single family houses. So I can't quite get my arms around what the, really what the issue is. I know that there's some ones that have gone through zoning board of appeals, but those would not be by right. And sometimes they're highly publicized, so they seem larger than life. But I think that the by right conversions just isn't happening. There isn't a flood of these conversions, unless they're happening underground, without permission.
Ms. Brestrup?
We did discuss that today at the zoning subcommittee, and as Mr. Schreiber said, we could come up with 4. The 2 Amherst College projects that you just approved, the project for Miss Jensen Hall up in North Amherst, and
79 Taylor.
Mr. Singh on 79 Taylor Street. And that's over a period of about 2 years.
Yeah, I think I agree. The larger issue is the conversion of entire dwellings to student housing. I mean, I don't know how much of that is new owners buying them up and how much of it is people leaving Amherst and renting out their houses. Mr. O'Keefe?
So that's a really interesting perspective to look at it from that perspective. I would say that the concerns that I've heard in my tenure on the zoning subcommittee and the board often get phrased in that language, by right conversion to duplex, but they don't necessarily technically refer to a site plan review approval that comes to this board, because as you said, we can count those on one hand that we've seen in the last couple of years. What people seem to be concerned about, and seem to be more numerous, are just conversions of owner-occupied housing into student rental, which anyone can do, and this is also by right. I can move out of my house and rent it to 4 students. That's not even a SPR in the zoning bylaw. That's a Y. It's the same use. It's still a single-family residential use. I can do that today. Any of us could do that with our houses today. We could rent it to 4 students perfectly legally, and people can and are doing that all over the place. Or I can rent it to 7 students if I could squeeze a couple of them into the same bedrooms in my house illegally, and people probably are doing that as well. And so of course that becomes an enforcement issue and an inspections issue to help crack down on that. But it's not just an issue of by right conversion from single family to a duplex. It's, I think, a larger issue than that, conversion from owner occupied to rental housing. And those, I'm sure it would take a lot more than one hand, just work the fingers to count those.
Mr. Rosner?
I'm just wondering if we have statistics on that, or if it's possible to have statistics on that.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
I don't know, Chris, do you know if there's some assessor records, or the new town building inspector, perhaps?
Ms. Brestrup?
I am not aware of anyone in town hall who keeps track of whether a single-family house is occupied by an owner or is being rented. I don't believe we keep track of that.
The only thing is we have this rental registration system with the $10 fine.
What comes back to, my understanding of the rental registration system is that it's not enforced, and hardly any landlords actually do register their properties.
You could, I think it's one of the scope items in the housing market study,
Yeah.
and so the hope is if it's available and if it's best estimate, that the consultants will be looking at the number of owner to rental single family homes, so it's part of that study.
Mr. Schreiber?
But on the property cards, isn't there the question owner occupied, yes, no?
No, it's I think they do it by if the mailing address is the same as the property.
I see.
Or if it's a PO, I could live in my property and have a PO box. So if it looks like it's an away owner based on a different address. It's not that absolute. It's not that scientific. Owners get their mail elsewhere, and then you don't know.
My understanding is that the assessor does have some information to that effect, but it might be based on the same sort of hazy and inconclusive data that Ms. Kruger is citing. But there might be something, I'm pretty sure there is something out there, but its accuracy is questionable.
And then is that something that's going to be
Comment?
would you mind, please?
It's really
I will get to you,
it's
but we're having
relevant.
Mr. Schreiber.
But also on the property cards, isn't there the homestead exemption check box? Or is that in the deeds? Or
It's not.
yeah,
the
not.
assess- no.
I guess we can hear from the public if you'd like to comment real quick. Raise your hand, identify yourself, speak your piece.
If I may. Janet
Don't
Kelly.
speak for me, Janet.
Nope. All right, let me, she doesn't want me to speak for her, so there's information you could access, that's all I'll say. That's been collected by someone, but I'm not speaking for her.
Mr. Rosling, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's appropriate to designate a part on the agenda for a limited amount of time for citizen responses. A lot of boards and places where I've lived have that. We could put a time limit on it, but a situation like this, if people come to our meeting and know that eventually they will have an opportunity to talk because it's on the agenda, maybe they might not be so frustrated.
That's true. I think that's been the case on when I was liaison to the redevelopment authority. That was the case where there was a public comment period scheduled, and that's not currently the case in this particular issue. This is a zoning subcommittee report, and I guess normally we wouldn't take public comment during just subcommittee reports. We wouldn't normally have any. Normally everyone's gone by the time the subcommittee report comes around. So I think that's worth considering. Did you have some idea about how we might implement that?
Just putting it in there as an agenda item. Somewhere.
Maybe at the beginning.
Not at the beginning, but maybe after new business, before we get into a list of A&Rs and CBA applications and things like that.
Mr. Crown?
The zoning subcommittee also talked about possibly asking the planning board to move its report up to an earlier part in the schedule so that we would definitely get to this discussion all the time. If we're going to have this discussion all the time, let's make sure that we actually get to it. So we would propose possibly that it be the first order of business after any public hearings. So it might be number 3 or something, or it might be a standing thing that it's 3A or something.
That might be a good point for public comment.
And that might
as
be,
well. Yes, sure.
I meant to go on. And that might be the place that you also have.
Sure. Yeah. Right after that.
Yeah, I think between old business and new business, or because tonight, I mean, you're talking about just after any public hearings, but we also had these old business applicants coming in. So if we were going to schedule that in, which I think is a good idea in some sense, because I think it's important that we deal with these zoning issues as a board, and when we put them off till last, they sometimes get short shift because everybody just wants to go home. And it also does give the public a short shift too, because there aren't that many people who can stay out until 10 o'clock at night to comment on zoning. Apologies to the zoning subcommittee. Can we, I would propose that we add after section 3, that we add there's a couple ways we could do this. As the last item of old business, we could add the zoning subcommittee report, which is, it's not really old business, but it's continuing business. And public comment after that for some number of minutes. Ms. Brestra?
Are you talking about public comment with respect to zoning, or public comment, any kind of public
I think
comment?
just generally.
Yeah.
mean, I think one of the things that we heard too, just trying to address things that we heard at town meeting was that we weren't responsive as a board and that we didn't listen. So devoting, I don't know, what's a reasonable amount of time for public comment? Mr. Crowner?
So I think we should also consider, how we're going to proceed with doing zoning in the future. Zoning subcommittee typically gave 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour of public comment every week. So it could be substantial if the board decides to take on this task. There has to be a way for the public to interact with it. If the zoning subcommittee is going to continue, we will continue to have public comment at zoning subcommittee. And we don't necessarily want to have the same comments twice in the same evening. For time reasons, not because it's not important, but for time reasons. So I don't know how to handle it, but it's something to consider about how we're going forward overall.
I agree. Mr. O'Keefe?
So I would have to say that I think the chair's handling of public comment in general and specifically tonight is appropriate and reasonable. I think that the board needs to have a working discussion of the topics the board needs to talk about. The public needs to have the opportunity to be heard from if they want to be heard from. And tonight you've given the public the opportunity to do that. You told people that they would be able to speak to the meeting and gave them the opportunity after our discussion to do that. And I think that that's not a bad model going forward. I think that needing to schedule a particular period it potentially could transcend zoning. It covers other issues too. And I'm not convinced of the need to do that, or at least I think that it should be kept relatively small scale if we are going to proceed with that.
I do try to, if somebody's sitting in the audience, I do try to recognize them even if there's no particular, obvious, people comment on all sorts of things. Where a lot of times we'll have someone who's an applicant on one item and who has a comment on something else that's coming up in the meeting, as Mr. Hartman did. So I don't think, thank you for your vote of confidence in that. I'm willing to consider anything though. And I think that the point about, sometimes setting a limit on the length of time we spend with public comment might be advisable, especially if we're addressing things just because of time constraints. But at this point, I don't have any reasonable way to try and implement that, I guess, unless we're going to put it in the agenda. Mr. Schreiber?
Not to hurry along the agenda or anything, but would this be a good time to talk about the options for restructuring or for structuring the zoning subcommittee?
Yeah, we're all ears.
Well, I think that the concern that was stated was that the zoning subcommittee has become, right now it's a subcommittee of two, right? And that one of the goals was to somehow distribute the wealth. So I guess I'm curious as to what ideas have been thought about.
Mr. O'Keefe?
My input to the process would be that I think the structure that we have now of a subcommittee that brings its recommendations and discussion items to the board, and a board that actively participates in it, at least that's what we're evolving toward, is a good approach. It might not be the best approach, but I think it's worked reasonably well, and it could work even better with the types of suggestions that Rob and Bruce made tonight in terms of restructuring our planning board agenda a little bit to give that more prominence in our work at the planning board. So my personal feeling is that we don't necessarily need a restructuring of the committee. I think it might be difficult to given everyone's time commitments and availability to work on things, I think getting a larger, substantially larger subset of, or the entirety of this board involved in meetings outside of planning board meetings might be difficult as a practical matter. So I guess my sense is that I would like to see a subcommittee continue on more or less the structure that it's been continuing on, but with the board itself giving it and its recommendations more attention through more prominent placement on the agenda, more time allocated to discussion, more board feedback to the subcommittee in terms of items that the board feels should be prioritized. I think that would be a good approach going forward.
Mr. Rosner?
I actually disagree with Mr. O'Keefe. I don't think it has worked particularly well. I think it's been a source of frustration to a lot of residents in town that who see it as a small group that's controlling a lot of directed planning activity recommended by staff, to be honest. And I also think it's been an amazing amount of overwork on a very small number of people here, which is one reason why I had to get off of it. I just couldn't take it, and I can't see any way that it can continue with just 2 people. And I don't see anybody really jumping up and down, volunteering to get on, especially knowing what the workload is. I do think that there is a role for something called the zoning subcommittee, but I also earlier this evening heard a discussion, for example, from Ms. Kruger about housing and various aspects of all the housing issues that have come up that we need to address, or that we should address, or that we might address. And just throwing this out there as one example, for example, the zoning subcommittee, namely Bruce and Rob right now, might come before us, and at that point on the agenda might identify that this is a particular issue. Okay, now who on this board might address this particular issue of housing? And it might be one of the 2 people on the zoning subcommittee, plus 1 or 2 or 3 or more others on the planning board who want to be involved in that particular issue. And then that group meets as basically a zoning subcommittee. A note from the rules and regulations of the Town of Amherst Planning Board, which was passed out in relation to potential amending of them, that the planning board shall appoint such standing subcommittees as may be constituted. There's nothing etched in stone that says it needs to be a zoning subcommittee. I think we need to address the issues as they have arisen, address the needs of the town in various aspects for planning and zoning in the town, in a practical way that doesn't literally overburden us and make us not want to be public servants and serve the town. So that's my piece. I mean, that's just one example, a housing example. For example, maybe one person from the zoning subcommittee can be on each of whatever task force gets constituted to address a particular issue. And those task forces can report back during the zoning subcommittee part of the agenda.
Ms. Brestrup?
I just, I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but I feel that Jonathan Tucker knows the zoning bylaw backwards and forwards. And I don't, and I'm not, I guess I can say this, we've had feedback from the community that there are too many planners, and that there are too many planners at too many meetings. And I go to the zoning subcommittee meeting because I feel like it's important for me to understand changes that might occur so that I can help you to cope with whatever applications are coming along. But Jonathan goes to the zoning subcommittee because he's really working, you know, on a word by word, line by line basis with the committee and developing the language and developing the approach and all of that. And so I'm kind of imagining that if the full board, or if different groups of the board take on zoning, it's going to require a different arrangement with staff. I'm not saying that this can't be worked out, but I'm saying that it will change the ability of the people who are working on zoning maybe to rely as much on staff. Maybe that would be a good thing, I don't know, but you know, it would be hard to imagine Jonathan Tucker coming to planning board meetings and, you know, being here for all of the public hearings and then being here for the zoning portion and the public input portion, as well as going to these individual meetings with different groups who are working on different things. So I think that kind of needs to be put into the mix. That's all I'm saying. That this issue of staffing needs to be considered when you're thinking about how you're going to restructure. And the other thing is, all of these meetings will have to be noticed 48 hours in advance, so people can't be having meetings by calling each other up and saying, let's meet on Tuesday morning. You know, you have to at least get somebody in town hall involved in posting these meetings. So there's some effort that's going to need to be put into organizing it.
I'm gonna take a couple of devil's advocate positions, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I want to put them out there as extremes because I think, you know, there's so much that's being discussed here that it's hard to get a grasp on what the scope of it is. One extreme option would be to dissolve the zoning subcommittee entirely. There's nothing in any of our rules or in the zoning bylaw that says we have to be constantly tweaking the zoning. Right? There's nothing there at all. And if there's something that's that important that the zoning needs to be tweaked or changed, it can come to the full board. There. That's one extreme position. If it's important enough to need rezoning, it should come to the full board. There's no need to have a subcommittee dealing with it. Have a public hearing, decide what to do, and be done with it. You know, the other extreme, I guess, is to I mean, I don't know. It's having not sat on the zoning subcommittee. I've been to a couple of meetings, not very many. I went to a couple of zoning forums. That's it. I don't have a sense of how the zoning committee's time is used, except as for how you've represented to us. I don't know whether it's helpful or harmful to the town in terms of whether it's doing any good or not. I mean, in terms of what we saw at the last town meeting, we had a lot of divisiveness and discord and unpleasantness around the rezoning. And, you know, the general purpose of zoning is to set the ground rules so that when a person buys or owns a piece of property, they know what they can or can't do with it. Rezoning should be difficult, and changing the zoning bylaw should be difficult because it changes the rights of property owners over land that they purchase, right? That's why it requires 2/3 vote of a town meeting. And we spend an awful lot of time doing these, and we did spend an awful lot of time with these rezoning projects and town money, taxpayer money, for things that ultimately have not passed yet. So the devil's advocate position is, you know, absent any pressing need, maybe trying to implement the master plan through zoning is just not something that's going to work right now, at least until we have more information from the studies and so forth. So that's my piece. I don't necessarily believe any of that or subscribe to it, but it's, I mean, I'd be surprised if it didn't cross the mind of a lot of people here as far as where we're going to go with this stuff. So I don't have the time to volunteer for zoning subcommittee. I don't know if anybody else does. To keep it in its current form, we need someone to step up and fill that third slot. Because unless you two feel comfortable proceeding as a two-man subcommittee. Mr. Crine?
I just think it's a little awkward is all. It's in other words, any recommendation is coming from two people instead of from 3 people, and so there's less diversity of opinion, there's less ideas being exchanged. So it's just not optimal. But if the zoning subcommittee continues to exist, I plan to stay with it because I think it's interesting and worthwhile, but it's not necessarily the best.
I would agree. I will remain as part of it if that feels needed, but I could also see your point too. Although I should say that, as I think you mentioned earlier, Rob, that the public comment we receive is lengthy, and to do that in this board, I think we'd have to have more meetings. I mean, we wouldn't maybe be able to meet just twice a month. At least occasionally there might have to be more meetings, because or else the meetings would become very, very long. Because for example, what we did tonight, if we, on top of that, needed to have an hour-long discussion about a zoning issue and public comment, and that you could see how long the meetings would end up being. So
what I'm sorry. Like, what would the nature of the public comment tonight have been?
Well, we had a lot of discussion about, how to proceed with these various proposals, and then we talked about the university's involvement with private
to serve on a 6 or 8 week basis to address this issue and make a report back to the planning board. That's kind of how I see it, to be honest. To have a zoning subcommittee of 2 people, I think is downright dangerous.
Mr. Schreiber?
Well, one point the only zoning subcommittee meetings I've been to are, I think, 2 forums. At one point I was very interested in, and still am, in tweaking something, defining better what a setback is. And at the time, one time I mentioned that at the full planning board, and basically the comment was that the zoning subcommittee, basically had a very full plate, but if I were interested in advancing that, then I could become a setback subcommittee of 1, or I could, in other words, there's nothing that prevents any of us individually from bringing, ideas to the, back to the whole board. So I guess I'm kind of supporting this concept because, listening to the priority list, there's some things I'm really interested in, some things that I'm really, not interested in. And the idea of, it just becomes too overwhelming for me to, imagine myself in, thank you for the, amazing work, but just, sort of wading through things that my input, is fairly limited. But there are some things that I'm very interested in that I'd be, love to do a deep dive in, but diving into the whole pool is too difficult to imagine.
Mr. Carson?
I could see following Richard's idea if at every meeting we start with the discussion of these whatever issues would come up, whether the planning department would present issues, or citizens would, or we would as individuals, and then that might be when the public comment could be, and then if we needed to form a task force or a committee, we could. But I think it would have to be preferably at the beginning of each meeting, so that people wouldn't be waiting for long periods of time to comment if they had a specific issue they wanted to address. Or if task forces have been formed, that's when they could give their reports and there could be discussion. But I think we would have to build it in, and for instance tonight with all of these applications, we wouldn't be able to handle all those in one night. There would have to be...
That could have been rescheduled.
Right, there'd have to be some rescheduling.
Yeah. All right, I'm starting to see a kind of a consensus taking shape here. And I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Carter. I like the vision of dividing it and parceling it out, and I share Mr. Rosner's concerns about having a subcommittee of 2. It's an awful lot of work for 2 people to take on, and I think that there is something to be said for bringing any zoning issues before the full board from the beginning, instead of bringing them to us a month before 10B. So now, go ahead. That was just my comment.
Yeah, I agree with Richard too. It is an interesting model. However, Again, devil's advocate is an interesting approach, and that is that village center zoning is not just a planning department initiative or planning board initiative. It's also, there are people who want it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and organizations, Hampshire College wants it, or Atkins Market wants it, whatever. So that, and that is not a 6 or 8 week task force. That's a bigger process. We actually, we spent several weeks or months hiring somebody,
Right.
and then doing the select process and whatever. That took a long time, and it has led to exposed other issues, housing issues in particular. So it might not necessarily be a good idea to say, okay, you 3 are working on this zoning piece, and you 3 are working on this zoning piece, and there might need to be more integration, but that could possibly work out anyways. I mean, it worked out in the planning board or whatever. But I'm just saying that it's not necessarily going to be easy to do this. Although I like what Richard has suggested.
If I may, just briefly, some issues might be more longer span issues and more involved, but some might not be.
Listen, I hate to do this, but I think we may have to table this at this point. It's awfully late, and we're not going to come to any kind of a decision tonight on what to do. I think I'd like to put this on the agenda again because it's a big issue. We're going to have to address it. And everybody wants to raise their hand. Everybody wants to talk about it. I see 4 or 5 hands up. That's why we need to stop now because it's after 10:30. It's time to go home.
This is actually related to the zoning subcommittee. Should the zoning subcommittee continue to meet if we're also going to be doing this? I mean, because we have a meeting set up for July 18th and August 1st. Should we hold those meetings or not?
I wouldn't presume to stop you from holding the meetings. This is how I feel about it. But Richard.
No. Can I make a suggestion that you meet and discuss this with Mr. Tucker and as to what might be workable, or maybe some of the ideas that I put forward have some fail-safe blow-up idea that maybe we can accomplishable. I don't know.
Well, I think if I may just, I think for us to talk about it and then talk about it here at the next meeting, everybody think of ideas in the meantime would be helpful. We appreciate ideas. Sure.
All right. I think we don't want to be hasty. So
sure.
I'd hate to try and do something out of. Yes, Mr. O'Keefe.
Just in terms of homework for next time, I would urge everybody to think about prioritization of the issues. Like we've spent this whole discussion just having a structural discussion of how to organize our efforts about zoning. We haven't talked about the content at all. So Mr. Crowner presented us with a fairly lengthy list of issues that do need to be considered and worked on, not because they're being driven by the planning department, but because people sat in front of us last week at the zoning forum and asked us to consider by right conversion to duplexes and transfer development rights and rezoning our flood-prone conservancy district. Those are all things that people came before us and told us they think are priorities. That's why they're on that list. So someone, whether it's the zoning subcommittee or the planning board or designated task forces, we do need to keep that stuff moving. And so just think about those issues and think about the relative priorities you would assign to them versus village center rezoning, which we haven't talked about at all. Those are the kinds of things I think we should be talking about next time around.
Just a quick question. We never got a copy of that for whatever reason.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And it's not your fault. But at one point I was asking that we be copied on all the full board be copied on all zoning subcommittee emails, just as a CC. And somehow that stopped happening along the way, and I haven't received anything about the zoning subcommittee in months, so I don't really know what's going on with your agendas or anything else. We don't get copied on that by the person who sends out the notifications. So
I've been getting copies of those. So I wonder if you
Maybe it's in your spam filter.
Do not call this.
You caught me.
I apologize for that. We've been so busy with applications that I think that that's it.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I'm just trying to, just because we don't have the list, you're talking about these priorities, and it's the first we've heard of them. So,
We should send all you, we should get a copy of that so
Local
that.
planning board.
all right. So, yes, Mr.
I'm
Schreiber.
sorry, but if some of us wanted to, maybe all of us wanted to go to the zoning subcommittee meeting just to see what it's like on July 18th, is there a quorum issue or is there, so anyone can
It's posted as a
attend?
planning board meeting.
Pardon me?
It's posted as a planning board meeting, so it's.
Oh, it's posted as, okay. So that might be a, guys, to make that as a friendly suggestion, that would be.
Okay, it's a call to action.
Yeah, and also, I was gonna suggest that I could send up to the PVPC, kind of the best practices, like how do the 44 jurisdictions.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah, it is.
That's a very good idea.
How do people handle this?
Yeah.
Other towns. Do I have a motion of some sort?
Move to
Motion to
extend.
this.
What? Thank you, everyone. Thank you.